What if I told you that one of the most mysterious prophets in all of Scripture saw a vision so strange, so terrifying, and so otherworldly that theologians and scholars still argue over what it could possibly mean? Ezekiel didn't just hear the voice of God, he saw it. He witnessed wheels in the sky covered in eyes, creatures with 4 faces, and a valley filled with dead bones that somehow rose and came alive again. But what most people never realize is that behind these surreal, mind-bending images is a story, one of the most heartbreaking and profound narratives of exile, divine judgment, and ultimate hope in the entire Bible. We're about to journey deep into the full account of Ezekiel, from the moment he was called as a prophet among the captives in a foreign land, all the way to the final visions he received about a restored temple, one that has never, even to this day, been built. But before we begin this deep dive, if you're new to this channel and this kind of content helps you slow down or reflect, consider tapping that like button and subscribing. And if you'd like, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is. We genuinely love hearing from you. So now, without delay, let's step into the vision, shall we? The sky splits open above the Khabur River, not like fog lifting at dawn, but violently, with force and fury. A thunderous storm cloud hurtles forward, crashing through the calm with divine intention. It barrels straight toward the young man named Ezekiel, driven by a purpose that is not of this world. From within the whirlwind, 4 beings emerge, each one bearing 4 faces, one of a man, one of a lion, one of an ox, and one of an eagle. Their wings stretch wide and touch each other at the tips. Beneath them, wheels spin, wheels within wheels, rotating in ways that defy human logic. The rims blaze with countless eyes, unblinking and all-seeing. These eyes don't just watch, they perceive. They look through skin, through bone, straight into the soul itself. Fire dances between the beings, and bolts of lightning rip across the sky. The sound roars louder than thunder and vibrates deeper than any earthquake. This is no storm of the earth. This is heaven itself crashing into the realm of men. Above the living beings, a crystal surface spreads out, clear and terrible, like a frozen sea suspended in the sky. And resting on that platform, a throne appears, sapphire, glowing with a blue so pure it rivals the deepest parts of the ocean. Upon that throne, there sits a figure, human in shape, yet engulfed in radiant amber fire from the waist up. Below the waist, flames whirl and dance. Around this figure, light radiates in all directions like a halo, a rainbow refracted through storm and flame. The colors are soft and beautiful, yet the power behind them is terrifying. Ezekiel knows at once, this is the glory of the Lord. Not a symbol of God, not a shadow or dream. This is God himself, revealing his true presence. The realization crashes over him like a tidal wave. The young priest's knees give out. His strength leaves him. He collapses face first into the dirt along the riverbank. Then the voice comes. It rushes like a river, deep, boundless, commanding. It calls his name, Son of Man. These 3 words carry more than just identity. They mark him. A mortal now stands before the eternal, just face to face with divinity. Terror seizes every fiber of his being. This isn't the gentle God he heard about in lullabies and childhood prayers. This is the Lord of hosts, the creator of galaxies, the one who speaks in storms. The kind of power beyond human comprehension has chosen to speak to him. And from this moment on, Ezekiel's life will never be the same. The vision carves itself into his memory. Every movement, every hue, every sound. The spinning wheels will haunt his sleep. The 4 faces will flash behind his eyelids in silent moments. And the image of the throne will blaze behind his eyes until the day he dies. But right now, in this instant, there is nothing but awe and terror, and the crushing weight of holy presence settling over a young man who thought he understood who God was. The river beside him continues to flow, peaceful, unbothered. Everything else in his world, however, has changed forever. The context surrounding this is collapse. Jerusalem stands at the brink of ruin. The once great city that basked in Solomon's glory now quivers under the looming threat of Babylon's rising empire. King Nebuchadnezzar's legions stretch their shadows across the land. The land itself begins to tremble, as if sensing what is coming. The Golden Age is drawing to a close, but only a few recognize it. In the temple courts, the air that was meant to be sacred is now thick with politics and schemes. Priests conspire with princes, and false prophets hand out comforting promises of easy peace. The Lord will never abandon his holy city, they proclaim. Jerusalem is safe, they insist. Their words are smooth, sweet to the ear, but they carry the bitter aftertaste of deceit. Young King Jehoiakim now sits on David's throne, immature, unwise. His father's defiance toward Babylon left the kingdom fragile and exposed. And now, Babylon approaches like a rising flood, swift and unstoppable. The ancient walls that had defended kings for centuries can no longer hold back the crashing tide of empire. In these turbulent days, Ezekiel walks the streets of Jerusalem, not yet a prophet, but a priest in training. He was born into the priestly line of Buzi. He should have spent his days in the temple, living a life shaped by ritual and rhythm, morning offerings, evening prayers, songs of praise echoing through sacred halls. But instead, he watches with growing sorrow as corruption creeps into every corner of the holy city. Merchants peddle goods in the temple courts. Judges take bribes. The hungry are left to starve while the wealthy throw lavish feasts. Israel has abandoned the covenant. The sacred law gathers dust and forgotten scrolls while the people chase the allure of foreign idols. Ezekiel sees what others cannot or refuse to see. This is no longer just a political crisis. This is spiritual collapse. The nation that was meant to shine as a light to the world now radiates only darkness. The temple still stands, but the presence of God feels far away. Prayers rise but return unanswered, echoing hollow in empty rooms. And then comes the news from the north. The Babylonian armies are moving, relentless, like a swarm of locusts. They devour everything in their path. City after city crumbles. Refugees pour into Jerusalem, their faces pale with horror, their mouths full of stories, children ripped from their mother's arms, homes turned to ash, lives shattered. But even then, the leaders refuse to listen. God dwells in Zion, they say with conviction. His holy mountain cannot fall. They place their hope in stone walls instead of righteousness. They put their trust in their own strength instead of divine mercy. Ezekiel can feel it, the tension thickening, pressing in. Something is coming. Something terrible, but something necessary. The God of Israel will not be mocked forever. Justice delayed is not justice denied. The day of reckoning approaches. It rises like a storm on the edge of the sky. And yet, the city goes on holding its breath. The market stalls remain open. Children still play in the narrow streets. But underneath the ordinary, fear simmers. Change is already on its way, whether they're ready for it or not. For young Ezekiel, these are the final days of everything he has known. Soon, he will discover that God's purpose for him reaches far beyond the temple gates. His calling won't be found in the safe rituals of Jerusalem, but in the strange, desolate places where faith is broken and rebuilt. Then the siege begins. Sudden, brutal. Nebuchadnezzar's army encircles Jerusalem like a steel trap. The massive walls that once protected generations now become the city's prison. Food becomes scarce. Hope becomes rarer still. Too late, King Jehoiakim realizes the truth: resistance is useless. The might of Babylon won't be overcome by passionate speeches or desperate prayers. And so, surrender comes, but the cost is steep. The king himself is taken into exile. Along with him, 10,000 of the most capable, the brightest minds, the future of the nation. Ezekiel stands among them, not selected for glory, but for removal. Babylon has no interest in leaving Israel's leaders behind to inspire rebellion. It's better to take the educated, the artisans, the priests, and put them to use in a foreign land. Israel's future shuffles forward in chains. The forced march begins at dawn, heavy with sorrow. Families are torn apart. Children scream for parents who will never walk beside them again. The elderly, too frail for the journey, are left behind to die in silence. Jerusalem is drained of its soul. Only a shell remains. Dust swirls beneath the feet of thousands as they walk the long road to Babylon. With every mile, their world falls further behind. The temple becomes a memory. The hills of Judah disappear into the past. And the God who once filled Zion now feels impossibly distant. Days blur into weeks beneath a punishing sun. Water is precious. Those who collapse along the road are left behind. The soldiers have no mercy for the weak. This is not migration. It is judgment. Not a journey, but a reckoning. Ezekiel's feet bleed inside his sandals. His priestly robes hang in tatters. Hands once prepared to lift sacred offerings now drag through foreign dust. All that he was trained for has vanished behind him. Everything he once dreamed of has turned to ash. Then Babylon rises before them. A fevered hallucination made real. Towers that stab the sky. Walls so vast they make Jerusalem feel like a village. A city sprawling in every direction, filled with idols Israel was taught to despise. This is the heart of the beast. The exiles are settled near the Kaba River. It's not the worst place they could be, but it is still far from home. The water flows without concern for their sorrow. Foreign soil beneath their feet. foreign voices in their ears, foreign gods on every street corner. Here, they must learn to live anew. New customs, new languages, new masters. The young men who were meant to be priests in Jerusalem now serve foreign kings. The craftsmen build monuments for gods they were once taught to denounce. Ezekiel lives among the exiles at Tel Aviv. There, grief hangs thick in the air. They whisper of home, afraid to speak too loudly. They wonder if God has abandoned them. Why do the righteous suffer? They ask, while the wicked prosper. Some learn the language quickly. They adapt, even embrace the culture. They make peace with the pain and settle into their new reality. Others retreat into memory, feeding on bitterness. They clutch hatred and dream of revenge. Both paths feel like betrayal. The young priest is left adrift, caught in questions that offer no easy answers. Where is God in this place? Can he still be worshipped in foreign soil? Are the promises to Israel now meaningless? Has the covenant been shattered forever? In the quiet evenings, Ezekiel sits beside the river and watches the water slide past. It moves without end, yet it seems to go nowhere. Just like his life now, just like his people, just like his faith. Everything flows, but the destination remains hidden. And then the vision returns. But this time, it doesn't come gently. It crashes down like a lightning bolt, tearing open the heavens. The storm cloud rushes once more across the skies above the Kaba River. The four living creatures emerge again from the whirlwind. Each face burns: man, lion, ox, eagle, radiating terror and beauty beyond measure. Their wings beat with the roar of oceans. The wheels within wheels spin faster now, their rims still crowned with endless, searching eyes. Nothing escapes them. Above, the crystal expanse gleams, purer than the clearest morning air. And upon it, the throne of sapphire returns, glowing deep and blue like the bottom of the sea. The figure who sits upon it blazes with amber fire from the waist up, flames swirling beneath. A radiant rainbow crowns his form. But this time, Ezekiel doesn't fall face down. This time, the voice calls out with a force that shapes reality itself. Son of man, stand on your feet. And the words themselves lift him. The spirit surges into him, not soft, but like wind slamming into a sail. He finds himself standing, still afraid, yes, but now filled with strength that isn't his own. Divine energy pulses through mortal flesh. And the voice says, I am sending you to the Israelites, to a people who have turned away, to a nation that no longer listens. The words cut deep because they are undeniably true. God's chosen people have turned their backs on him, trading loyalty for idols. The covenant lies in ruins, shattered like a pot smashed against stone. And the throne on wheels, the chariot of fire, the structure Ezekiel has now seen twice, reveals something profound and unsettling. The Lord is not locked inside Jerusalem's temple. He is not bound to any one place. His glory moves wherever he wills. Even here, beside the Kaba River in Babylon, far from Zion, his presence arrives with power. Ezekiel receives his commission, but it isn't a reward. It's a burden. He is being called to speak to a people who will not hear. He is being sent to warn those who are in love with their sin. His voice must cry out in the dry wilderness of exile, even as the people around him plug their ears and shut their hearts. The vision is both terrifying and full of wonder. Terrifying because it shows that God is willing to leave his own house when his people reject him. But wonderful, too, because it proves that he has not left them completely. Even in foreign lands, even in punishment, even in shame, he still comes. The wheels within wheels spinning in every direction represent a vision beyond time, beyond the limits of human thought. Past, present, and future collapse into a single frame before the eyes of the eternal. What looks like devastation to human minds is, in God's view, the beginning of something entirely new. Exile is not the end. It is a reset, a rebirth. The four faces Ezekiel sees, the human, the lion, the ox, the eagle, together reflect the completeness of creation, intelligence, courage, strength, and vision. All of it, every piece of it, exists to serve the one who reigns on the throne. Even here, in this foreign place, he is still Lord over all. And now Ezekiel understands his purpose with burning clarity. He is not meant to be a priest who simply offers daily sacrifices in a quiet temple. He is called to be a watchman, one who sees what others do not, and who sounds the alarm even when no one wants to hear it. His words won't soothe. They'll slash through comfortable lies like blades. Because the chariot throne doesn't stay in one place. God's reign is not confined. It rolls across the nations. The gods of Babylon are powerless illusions. The Lord of hosts is still supreme, even here, even now. And as the vision fades, Ezekiel knows his world is changed forever. He is no longer just a displaced temple servant. He has become the voice of God to a hard-hearted generation. The task is heavy, but the assignment is certain. And then, the next instructions come. So clear, so strange, they cannot be ignored. God commands Ezekiel to turn his body into a prophecy. He must stop using words alone. His very flesh must become the message. Take a clay brick, the Lord says. Draw Jerusalem on it. Surround it with siege works, ramps, and enemy camps. So Ezekiel does. With painstaking detail, he shapes a miniature version of the holy city under attack. It looks almost like a child's game, but every inch of it is deadly serious. What he enacts in dust will soon come to pass in stone, in flame, and in blood. Then comes the iron plate. It must stand between Ezekiel and the model city. This, God says, will be an iron wall between you and them. It's a symbol of divine judgment, God himself placing a barrier between his prophet and his rebellious people. No prayers will get through. No pleading will reach his ears. And then comes the strangest command yet. Ezekiel must lie on his left side. Every day, for 390 days. He is to bear the sin of Israel in his very posture, his body becoming a living judgment. Day after day, unmoving, always facing the tiny clay Jerusalem, carrying guilt like invisible chains. The people gather to watch. At first they whisper, "Has grief finally driven him mad?" They ask, "What kind of prophet acts like this?" But their confusion is part of the message. Because when truth sounds like madness, it reveals who truly loves lies. After the 390 days, he must turn. 40 more days on his right side for the sin of Judah. His body becomes a human calendar of national failure. Each day of stillness counts for a year of disobedience. The weight of generations presses into his muscles and bones. And there is more. His food must be measured precisely, 20 shekels of bread each day. His water is rationed. This is how people will eat during the siege. God says, barely enough to survive, with hunger clawing at their bellies and thirst haunting every moment. As they watch him waste away, ribs visible, eyes sunken, they begin to understand. This is their future. This is the cost of rebellion. And then, the most revolting order of all. He must cook his food over burning human waste. Even this repulsive act carries meaning. In the coming siege, fuel will run out. People will burn anything to stay alive. Even what they thought sacred, cleanliness, dignity, will be consumed. Ezekiel pleads for a lesser defilement, and God allows cow dung instead. But the horror remains. The people who believe they were pure will be made unclean by the reality they have chosen. Children gather to watch the strange priest act out his message with his body. Parents pull them away, but not before the images burn themselves into memory. Long after his voice fades, these moments will linger in young minds. The elders, exasperated, ask him, "Why not just speak? Why act this out?" But Ezekiel knows that words have already failed. Sermons have been ignored. Sometimes, people need to feel the truth in their stomachs before they'll let it reach their hearts. Sometimes, only the body can teach what the mind refuses to learn. With each day, tension in the settlement grows. What will this madman do next? How long will this disturbing spectacle continue? Their very curiosity keeps the message alive, passed around fires, whispered over meals. His sacrifice is not staged. His hunger is real. His weakness is sincere. But it all serves a greater purpose. In his brokenness, divine truth finds its clearest voice. Then comes another vision. From the throne, a hand extends, offering him a scroll. It is covered on both sides, no space left blank. Every inch of it filled with words of judgment, warning, sorrow. Son of man, the voice commands, eat what is before you. Eat this scroll. Then go speak to the people of Israel. It sounds absurd. Scrolls are meant to be read, not eaten. But Ezekiel obeys. He opens his mouth like a child, trusting the hand that feeds him. The scroll touches his tongue. and it tastes sweet, like honey, like fresh fruit plucked at dawn. The very words that spell doom for his people melt in his mouth like heaven's bread. This is the paradox at the core of his calling. God's judgment, though severe in its effects, springs from perfect love. Divine wrath is not cruel. It is holy justice responding to sin. Even destruction can be sweet when it clears the way for redemption. The scroll dissolves into him. It is no longer just a message. It becomes part of who he is. He cannot speak anything else. His voice will now echo the word that fills his soul. But God warns him, the people will not listen. Not because of Ezekiel, but because they have already stopped listening to God. The mission is destined to appear like failure from the beginning. He will speak, and they will refuse. His words will bounce off hardened hearts like stones off steel. But he must still speak, because success is not the measure. Faithfulness is. The duty of the watchman is not to guarantee results. It is to sound the alarm. If the people ignore him, their blood is on their own heads. But if he stays silent, the guilt falls on him. To strengthen him, God makes Ezekiel's forehead like flint, harder than diamond. He will need that kind of strength. The faces he will speak to are stubborn. They will mock him, threaten him, ignore him. But his face must not flinch. His eyes must remain fixed on truth. His commission ends with a final warning. Do not be like that rebellious house. Even while confronting defiance, Ezekiel must not let rebellion infect him. He must stay soft before God, even as he becomes unbreakable before men. The Lord makes one thing clear. His prophet must not mirror the stubborn hearts of the people he has been sent to warn. Ezekiel must stay soft toward God, even as he grows resolute in the face of relentless resistance. After consuming the scroll and vision, Ezekiel falls into silence for 7 long days. He sits among the exiles at Tel Aviv, still reeling from all he has witnessed and heard. The words now churn inside him, not as sweet promises, but as the weighty bitterness of judgment. While he says nothing, those around him watch with increasing curiosity. Something about him has shifted. There's new depth in his eyes, and even his silence carries undeniable gravity. He glows with the residue of divine encounter. On the 7th day, the silence breaks. God's voice returns, and with it, a charge both sacred and terrifying. I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. This assignment is both an honor and a burden. As a watchman, he will see danger long before others do. He will shout alarm while the people sleep in false peace. The weight of responsibility is immense. If he speaks and they ignore him, their blood is on their own heads. But if he stays silent, their blood will stain his hands. Every word he utters now carries eternal consequence. The tongue that had been frozen by awe is now loosed, but only when God commands it to speak. Silence and speech will alternate at divine prompting. He becomes like an instrument in the hands of the master, played only in appointed moments. What once tasted like honey in his mouth now turns bitter in his gut. This is the paradox of the prophet's call, to find joy in God's presence while mourning for God's people, to taste heaven but speak of hell. Then comes the next strange sign act. By the banks of the Kabar River, Ezekiel sees a sword gleaming in the early light. God tells him to take it, not to fight, but to shave. Use it as a barber's razor, he commands. Shave your head and beard. For a priest, this command borders on desecration. The law explicitly forbids priests from shaving their heads or beards, for those were visible signs of their sacred role. But these are not normal times. The temple is far away. The priesthood serves foreign kings. The old rules no longer protect what they once symbolized. God now calls for obedience that breaks tradition in order to reveal deeper truth. Sitting at the edge of the water, Ezekiel begins to shave. The blade scrapes against his scalp with rough, jarring sound. Thick tufts of hair fall to the dust, each stroke stripping away another mark of identity. The gathered exiles look on in disbelief. Whispers ripple through the crowd. What is he doing? They murmur. Has he lost his mind? But their shock is part of the message. Sometimes the truth must offend before it can rescue. His beard follows the hair from his head. The sword moves slowly, deliberately across his jaw and cheeks. Years of growth disappear in minutes. The face that emerges is bare, unfamiliar, almost childlike. Ezekiel has become a visual metaphor for loss and transformation. When the shaving is complete, he divides the hair into 3 precise portions. He weighs them with careful accuracy. Every strand has meaning. Each section of hair represents a different destiny for Jerusalem's people. 1/3 he throws into fire. Flames consume it quickly, turning it to ash and smoke. This symbolizes those who will die within the city walls, victims of famine, disease, and war. The fire shows no mercy, no favoritism. The second portion he strikes with the sword, scattering it in pieces. This signifies those who will fall by enemy hands. The blade that shaved him now becomes the weapon of prophecy. The third portion he casts into the wind, letting it scatter across the air. Some strands drift far, others fall close. This is the diaspora, God's people flung across the world like seeds on a storm. But even here, a thread of mercy glimmers. From the scattered hair, Ezekiel gently retrieves a few strands. He tucks them into the folds of his robe. Even in judgment, God preserves a remnant. Hope flickers, surviving even the sharpest cut. Yet not all who are preserved will be spared suffering. Some of these strands are also thrown into fire. Survival, Ezekiel realizes, is not the same as comfort. The remnant, too, must be refined, like gold tested in a furnace. The crowd around him begins to understand. They see themselves in the strands of hair, their families, their homes, their future, all reduced to symbolic ash, sword, wind. Some weep. Others turn away, unable to watch. None leave untouched. Then Ezekiel speaks. This is Jerusalem. His bald head gleams under the sun, a living signpost. She was placed at the center of the nations. But she rebelled more than any of them. The shaving, he declares, is a symbol of God's rejection of their rebellion. The hair may grow back, but the message will not fade. What appears to be final destruction may yet be divine pruning. Even the razor can be an instrument of love. Now God sends him to prophesy again. This time, not to the people directly, but to the high places of Israel. His voice cuts across the encampment like a blade through fabric. Today, the message targets the mountains, the ancient heights where generations have offered worship to false gods. Son of man, set your face toward the mountains of Israel, God says. Prophesy against them. Though the distant hills cannot hear, the exiles can. Through them, the warning will ride on the wind, all the way home. For those mountains hold secrets, dark altars, carved idols, incense rising in hidden groves. Sacred places that now reek of shame. Places meant to declare God's glory have become strongholds of rebellion. You mountains of Israel, Ezekiel cries, hear the word of the Lord. With each line, his voice strengthens. The fury of God flows through his human throat. These are not his words. They are fire from heaven, given breath. The high places have always drawn Israel's heart astray. There is something about elevation, closer to the sky, closer to false gods, that seduces human pride. But that height has only magnified their fall. Baal's altars still scar the ridgelines like festering wounds. Asherah poles rise like dead sentries over ruined devotion. The people bow to idols while claiming to belong to the living God. Their hearts are divided, and in that division, they serve no one, not truly. The prophecy becomes vivid and violent. Swords will strike those who kneel before dead gods. Their bones will lie scattered around the altars they once honored. The high places will become cemeteries for idolaters. I will destroy your high places, declares the Lord. Your altars will fall. Your incense stands will be smashed. Your people will die in the presence of their idols. The punishment fits the betrayal. Death will come where they once sought false life. But destruction is not the final goal. It's a clearing, a mercy in disguise. When the idols are gone and the people laid low, the ground will be ready for something new. Real worship can rise only from soil that has been stripped of lies. The mountains that once bore the weight of rebellion will soon witness renewal. Where carved gods once stood, truth will begin to grow. And though the people in exile are far from those hills, some still remember them. Some recall childhood festivals and incense burned under trees. Others remember hushed stories from fathers and grandfathers, half remembered, half defended. The message offers no neutral ground. There is no compromise between holy and profane. The mountains must choose whom they serve, and so must the people. Judgment begins on the high places, but its echo reaches even into the hearts of the exiled. The path back begins by tearing down what was falsely raised, and only then, in that cleared space, can true presence return. The knowledge of the true God will rise again. Geography may remain unchanged, but the spiritual atmosphere has undergone a radical shift. Among the exiles, some remember those high places from their childhood. They recall the climbs, the celebrations, the incense rising toward heavens to gods whose names they can barely recall now. For them, the prophet's words stir something deep, memories that are both warm and unsettling. Others have never seen those mountaintop shrines with their own eyes, yet they've inherited their weight. Fathers and grandfathers spoke of them in quiet tones, some condemning, others defending. The debate has torn families apart for generations. Ezekiel offers no middle ground. His message draws a line in the sand. There can be no compromise between truth and deception, no blending of the living God with dead idols. The mountains must choose who they belong to, and so must the worshippers who ascend them. The wind takes Ezekiel's message and carries it far beyond the circle of listeners, beyond Babylon's exile camps, into the lands where mountains still rise. On those distant peaks, false altars still smolder with sacrifice. But judgment is approaching, and when it arrives, even the hills will shake. Even in exile, God's people are faced with a decision. They can surrender to the gods of Babylon, adapting to the world around them, or they can cling to their ancient calling and remember the God who brought them out of Egypt. The mountains of Israel may be distant, but the choice is right in front of them every day. Then the visions shift. The Spirit grabs Ezekiel by a lock of his hair and lifts him into the air, carrying him like a bird riding the wind. In the span of a heartbeat, distance collapses. One moment, he is beside the Kaba River. The next, he is standing in the courts of the Jerusalem temple. But it is not the temple as it was meant to be. Corruption clings to every stone. The outer court is alive with activity, but not the kind that honors God. The place meant for holiness has become a marketplace for compromise. At the entrance to the inner court, a single idol looms, massive and looming, blocking the path to the true altar. It demands attention before a worshiper can even approach God. A spiritual blockade. Son of man, do you see what they are doing? God asks him. The question drips with heartbreak. These were his chosen people, set apart from the nations. Yet they treat his sanctuary like a common shrine, his holy courts like the temples of pagans. The vision goes deeper. The Spirit leads Ezekiel through a hidden doorway. Behind the visible temple lies a chamber filled with horror. 70 elders of Israel are gathered there, heads bowed before walls covered in grotesque carvings. Creeping creatures, detestable beasts. Each man holds a censer, the air thick with smoke rising to lifeless idols. These are the leaders of Israel, men appointed to guide the people in righteousness. Instead, they lead the nation into spiritual betrayal. The Lord does not see us. They whisper to one another. He has forsaken the land. Their worship of false gods is born from despair, dressed up as pragmatism. If God is gone, they reason, they must look elsewhere. But God sees it all. No chamber is hidden from his gaze. No whispered doubt escapes his notice. The belief that they can hide from him only shows how little they truly understand him now. The vision moves again. At the north gate of the temple, Ezekiel sees a group of women sitting in mourning. They are weeping for Tammuz, a Babylonian fertility god said to die and rise with the seasons. Their grief is real, but misdirected. They cry for a myth and ignore the living God who actually holds the seasons in his hands. Their worship is borrowed, their devotion wasted. Then, at the very heart of the temple, between the porch and the altar, 25 men bow, not to God, but to the rising sun. They have turned their backs on the sanctuary and now face east, offering prayers to created light instead of the Creator. The symbolism could not be clearer. They have literally turned their backs on the Lord. These men embody the final stage of abandonment. They practice their idolatry in the holiest space on earth, where the high priest himself should be making sacrifice each morning. They choose the sun over the sovereign. Is it a small thing, God asks with growing anger, that the house of Judah commits such detestable acts? His voice swells with righteous fury. Must they fill the land with violence, continually provoking me? This vision strips away every illusion. Jerusalem's coming destruction isn't the result of political miscalculation or military weakness. It flows from deep rot at the spiritual core. Outside threats can only finish what internal rebellion has already undone. Each level of the vision reveals another layer of betrayal. On the surface, all looks proper. But dig deeper, and compromise oozes out. Public worship hides private sin. The very house meant to contain God's glory has become a den of spiritual infidelity. And yet, even in this avalanche of corruption, a flicker of hope remains. God shows Ezekiel these abominations not to crush him, but to prepare him. Before restoration can come, the sickness must be diagnosed fully. The truth must be seen before healing can begin. And then, in the middle of the defiled temple, a new figure appears. He is clothed in linen, moving with solemn purpose. At his side is a writing kit. His task is mercy cloaked in judgment. He moves through the city with a mission, to mark those whose hearts still break over the abominations committed in God's name. Go through Jerusalem, the Lord commands, and put a mark on the foreheads of all who grieve and lament over what is happening here. Not everyone has grown cold. Some hearts still feel the weight of what's been lost. These marked ones are not perfect, but they have seen the corruption and mourn it. While others celebrate compromise, these few souls weep, and their tears are seen in heaven. Behind the man with the writing kit follow 6 other figures, each holding a weapon. They stand ready at the temple's entrance, awaiting the order. Judgment is coming, but mercy moves first. In God's order, the sword never strikes before grace has passed through. The mark is more than ink, it's a seal, a divine shield. Death will pass over those who wear it, just as death passed over the homes marked with lamb's blood in Egypt. History, once again, repeats itself. And who receives this mark? Not the priests swinging censers to idols. Not the women wailing for Tammuz. Not the men bowing to the sun. It goes to those who mourn what God mourns. Some are simple servants, laborers, merchants with no titles. Others may be found among priests and elders, though their numbers are few. God does not search by position. He looks for broken hearts. The marking takes time. The man in linen moves deliberately, looking deeply. Many who seem pious on the outside are empty shells. Others, overlooked by society, glow with authentic devotion. Divine vision pierces through the surface. Children are marked alongside grieving parents. The elderly who remember better days receive the same protection as the young who yearn for something more. God's remnant spans generations, united not by age, but by a shared sensitivity to His holiness. As the marking nears completion, the destroyers receive their silent command. They will follow behind. Judgment waits just beyond the threshold. But for now, the ink of mercy still flows. The order goes out with chilling finality, move through the city and strike down without pity or mercy. Slaughter the old men, the young men, the women, the maidens, and the children. But do not lay a finger on anyone who bears the mark. The command is brutal, but it reflects a justice that flows from perfect holiness. This is the outcome for those who have persistently chosen rebellion over repentance, who hardened their hearts against every plea from God, who refused mercy until none remained. Now they must face the full consequence of those choices. And the judgment begins not in the streets, not in the courts, but at the very heart of the temple. The cleansing starts at the sanctuary, the place where corruption first took root. The elders who offered incense to false gods are the first to fall. Their secret rooms, spaces hidden from human eyes, become their graves. And yet, even in this storm of judgment, God's character does not disappear into wrath. He doesn't strike blindly. He spares those whose hearts remained aligned with His. The mark on their foreheads becomes a shield, a symbol that mercy still lives within justice. Ezekiel watches the scene unfold, and 2 emotions wrestle within him: horror at how deep the judgment must go, and hope that God is still preserving a remnant. Both feelings are appropriate when holy love confronts hardened rebellion. That remnant, those who weep over sin, will become the seed of Israel's future. From their faithfulness, new generations will learn to worship in truth. Their grief today will become joy tomorrow. The mark that spares their lives now will also commission them to serve in the days ahead. Then comes one of the most devastating moments of all: glory departs. What Ezekiel sees next moves like a slow-motion farewell. God's presence, which had dwelt in the temple for centuries, begins to rise, not in rage, not in haste, but with the heartbreaking slowness of someone saying goodbye forever. From Babylon, Ezekiel is carried in spirit to Jerusalem's holy mountain. And there, he watches the glory that once filled Solomon's temple, radiant, sacred, untouchable, begin to lift. It starts at the innermost place, the Holy of Holies, where only the high priest may enter, once a year. The glory hesitates there, lingering as though reluctant to leave the space that had been its dwelling for generations. It is a sacred moment. This was the place where kings knelt for guidance, where priests offered blood for atonement, where pilgrims journeyed just for a glimpse. Now, the presence that made the temple holy is preparing to depart. From the Holy of Holies, it moves to the threshold of the temple, a space between inside and out, between staying and going. And still it waits. How long has God waited for repentance? How many times has he spoken through prophets, only to be ignored? How many warnings were sent, only to be scoffed at? The pause is mercy, but mercy has an end. Then the presence moves to the cherubim, the great, multi-faced beings with wheels of fire and eyes in every direction. They are God's chariot, his mobile throne. These are the same creatures Ezekiel saw by the Kabar River. The wheels, spinning with celestial precision, now turn once more. The cherubim rise. Their wings beat with the sound of crashing waves, like distant thunder rolling across a valley. Light flashes from the wheels, glinting like precious stones struck by morning sun. They lift the glory of the Lord into the air and begin their solemn procession. Away from the temple, away from the city, toward the Mount of Olives on the eastern edge of Jerusalem. There, the presence pauses once more. One final moment, one last glance at the city that was supposed to be a light to the nations. Down below, life carries on, merchants haggling in markets, children playing in courtyards, families gathering in homes, all unaware that the shield which had protected them for generations is now withdrawing. The symbolism cuts deep. When God's presence leaves, Jerusalem becomes just another city. The temple, just another building. The people, just another nation, now exposed to the chaos of the world, with no special favor left to claim. No miracles, no guarantees. Ezekiel takes it all in with solemn clarity. He now sees what many exiles still cannot grasp. Jerusalem will fall, not because God is weak, but because God has chosen to leave. The city will burn, not because Babylon's gods are stronger, but because Israel's God has removed his hand. This vision reveals everything: the reason for the prophet's urgent cries, the inevitability of disaster, the sorrow of watching even the faithful suffer alongside the faithless. When God's presence departs, judgment cannot be far behind. And the Mount of Olives, this place of final departure, will one day become the site of weeping again. Centuries later, another prophet will stand here, looking down on Jerusalem with tears in his eyes. He will speak of stones that cry out, of temples that fall, of a return yet to come when all things will be made new. But for now, it is the point of exit. The cherubim continue their flight. The wheels turn, and the glory, the same glory that appeared to Moses in a burning bush, that guided Israel by pillar of fire and cloud, that filled the tabernacle and later Solomon's courts, this very glory now lifts above the city and leaves it behind. Ezekiel watches until the vision ends. Then he's back at the Kabar River, back among the exiles. His neighbors are tending gardens, repairing nets, chatting about letters from home. They have no idea what he has just seen. They can't comprehend that the very presence of God has become a refugee, driven out of his temple, abandoned by his own people's unfaithfulness. The prophet sits in stunned silence. How do you tell people that the greatest treasure they had has just walked away? How do you put into words what it means that God has moved out? They still believe Jerusalem is untouchable because the temple is there, because they think God is still there. But he isn't. He left, and that changes everything. Israel can no longer assume divine protection just because of geography or tradition. The temple is not a shield if it's empty. Favor is no longer theirs by default. God's presence must be honored, not presumed. The vision proves something crucial. God is not bound to buildings. He is not confined to a city. He cannot be reduced to a monument. He is the God of Babylon too, the God of the exile, the God who meets his people not just in palaces or sanctuaries, but in suffering and silence in foreign lands. Ezekiel alone carries this knowledge. It is a truth not meant to be hidden, but it will be hard to proclaim. Who will listen when he says that God has left the holy city? Who will believe that the unthinkable has already begun? The Mount of Olives grows still. The vision fades. But what Ezekiel has seen will never fade from his memory. It is branded on his soul. He has witnessed the end of an era, the end of the time when people could take God's presence for granted, when they could use religion as a shield while ignoring justice and mercy. A new chapter begins now, one written in exile, one shaped not by the weight of glory, but by the ache of its absence. The streets of the exile settlement whisper with rumors. People talk in hushed tones about the strange priest. Ezekiel is becoming a public mystery, a prophet wrapped in silence, a man haunted by what he alone has seen. The strange man on the edge of the settlement has become something of a local legend, a neighborhood curiosity, the one who speaks in riddles and behaves like he's stepped out of a dream or a nightmare. Children dare each other to get close, to hear him muttering to himself as he goes about his bizarre routines. Adults look away, pretending not to notice, hurrying past with embarrassed glances. Every morning brings a new performance. One day, he's crouched over a collection of clay bricks, building a tiny city complete with walls, towers, and siege works. Another day, he lies still for hours on one side, eating exact portions of bread and water. A week later, he's outside shaving his head with a sword, dividing the hair into neatly measured piles. The other exiles observe him from a safe distance, caught between curiosity and discomfort. The elders gather in corners to debate what should be done. Some call him insane. Others whisper that he might be dangerous. A few, very few, suggest he could actually be a prophet, but the idea is laughed off almost as quickly as it's spoken. After all, prophets are supposed to bring words of comfort, not confusion. They're meant to lift spirits, not act out doom and disaster in public. They certainly aren't expected to put on strange displays in the middle of the village square. Meanwhile, the children turn his actions into games. They build their own miniature cities of mud, then smash them down in mock destruction. They lie motionless in the dust, imitating his sign acts. They chant made-up phrases, pretending to be possessed by the divine. Parents scold them for mocking sacred things, but the games continue anyway. Ezekiel ignores the laughter. He pays no attention to the sideways glances or whispered insults. He has work to do, messages to deliver, warnings to proclaim. God has made him a living sign, a walking metaphor for what is to come. His very body has become the canvas of prophecy. His routines are no longer personal habits. They are scriptures acted out in flesh and bone for anyone with eyes to see. With each new act, the isolation grows. Old friends now cross the street to avoid speaking to him. Neighbors no longer invite him to meals or gatherings. Even the other priests keep their distance, worried that being seen with him will damage their own standing. He walks through crowds but remains alone, surrounded yet untouched by human connection. Then, the hardest blow of all strikes, his wife becomes ill. She is the one person who has stood beside him through all the strangeness. She has listened to his visions without flinching, watched his performances without mockery, supported his divine calling without hesitation. She is his tether to normalcy, his anchor in the chaos. And now, she burns with fever. The illness comes quickly. One day, she is helping prepare props for another sign act. The next, she's struggling to breathe. Within days, she lies dying. Ezekiel sits at her side, holding her hand, praying for healing. But it doesn't come. Then, God speaks to him, and the message is colder than any silence. When she dies, he must not mourn. No tears, no crying, no tearing of garments, no wailing in the streets. He must dress as usual, wear his sandals, bind his turban, cover his face, and eat the food of mourners in total silence. No outward sign of grief. His wife passes as the sun goes down. The community waits for the traditional response: tears, dust thrown on the head, cries of anguish. Instead, Ezekiel washes her body with gentle care, wraps her in clean linen, and buries her alone, without ceremony. He returns home and sits in absolute silence. His face dry, his voice still. The neighbors are stunned, appalled. What kind of man shows no emotion for his wife's death? What sort of husband buries the love of his life like she was a stranger? The whispers get louder. Some call him unfeeling. Others claim he never loved her. A few declare he's finally snapped. But Ezekiel's silence speaks more powerfully than any scream. His dry eyes shout what his voice does not. His restraint is itself a message, a symbol, a living parable of what is about to happen to Jerusalem. Just as he is unable to mourn his personal loss, the people of Israel will soon be so crushed by national disaster that individual grief will be impossible. The sign act begins to settle into the community's awareness. Slowly, they start to realize that his strange behavior always points to something greater. His wife's death and his unnatural response are not madness. They are previews, warnings. Soon, everyone will lose someone. Soon, there will be no time, no strength, no space for traditional mourning. Numbness will become a necessary survival instinct. The next day, Ezekiel returns to his public post. He resumes his prophetic duties. Another clay city, another mock siege. But everything has changed. The man who buried his wife without a single tear is the same one warning of a city's collapse. His private loss now casts a solemn authority over his public words. His grief, though hidden, radiates credibility. The crowds gather as always, but the air is different. The laughter is gone. The smirks replaced by uncomfortable silence. The easy dismissal has given way to reluctant attention. It no longer feels like theater. It feels like truth. Ezekiel doesn't speak often, but when he does, his words cut like sharpened blades. He explains the meaning of his wife's death and what his silence symbolizes. He draws the line between personal tragedy and national catastrophe. His own grief becomes a window into God's heart, a God wounded by the betrayal of his people. Some in the crowd start to connect the signs. The miniature cities are Jerusalem. The measured rations foreshadow famine. The hair scattered to the wind represents death and exile. And the absence of mourning mirrors the scale of future suffering. Every strange act is a piece of a larger puzzle. Others remain skeptical. They prefer their prophets neat, respectable, miraculous. Not a man lying in the street, whispering metaphors and acting out doom. They continue to call him disturbed instead of divine. But Ezekiel presses forward. His mission isn't dependent on applause. His calling isn't up for debate. His authority flows from heaven, not from the opinion of exiles. Whether they listen or not, he will continue. He is the watchman. His duty is to sound the alarm. Whether they wake or keep sleeping is no longer his concern. The street performances continue. So does the mockery. But something in the exile camp has shifted. The man they once called eccentric now carries a weight that demands attention. His willingness to lose everything for the sake of his message forces even critics to wonder. Perhaps, just perhaps, there's more to Ezekiel than madness. Perhaps, behind the oddness lies wisdom. Perhaps, in his warnings, there is truth. Then his voice changes. A new tone enters the air. The riddles stop. The symbols fade. The performances pause. Now comes the message in clear, unmistakable language. No metaphors. No enactments. Just the raw, brutal truth. Jerusalem will fall. The temple will burn. The people will die by sword, by famine, by plague. What once seemed unimaginable is now assured. Ezekiel stands in the market square, his voice rising above the noise of bargaining and casual conversation. His words slice through the dust like lightning through still air. Women carrying water pause, their eyes wide. Children stop playing. Even the elders, those who mocked the loudest, begin to edge closer, unable to turn away. The prophet continues his march through dread and warning, drawing a vivid, almost unbearable portrait of the catastrophe that looms on the horizon. The siege, he declares, will come swiftly and relentlessly. Babylon's armies will encircle Jerusalem like hunters closing in on wounded prey. The very walls that once promised protection will become prison bars, trapping those inside with their own desperation. Food will dwindle, then disappear. What was once plentiful will become precious, then unthinkable. Water will be measured drop by drop. The wealthy will chew on gold and jewels and madness. The poor will gnaw on leather straps and sandals. Mothers will stare at their children with a hunger that has nothing to do with affection. Fathers will hoard crumbs in secret corners, hiding scraps of moldy bread from the mouths of their own families. Women of refinement will battle one another in the gutters over donkey bones. Cannibalism will become the city's final shame, dragging the holy down below the pagan. The line between man and beast will snap beneath the weight of starvation. Ezekiel does not speak in vague threats. He names names. King Zedekiah, still clinging to the illusion that clever politics will save him, will see his sons executed in front of him. Their deaths will be the last thing he ever sees before the Babylonians put out his eyes. He will be dragged in chains to Babylon, a blind and broken man, a puppet king whose strings have been severed. The false prophets, those who dared to promise peace when there was none, will be stunned into silence as siege engines pound Jerusalem's gates. The priests who welcomed idols into sacred places will discover their rituals mean nothing against fire and steel. The nobles who once crushed the poor will beg for mercy from foreign soldiers who do not understand their language, their culture, or their cries. The temple will not be spared. The great cedar beams of Solomon's masterpiece will crack and burn. Gold will melt and run in rivers down the Temple Mount. The bronze pillars, once symbols of God's eternal covenant, will be smashed and carted off as scrap. The Holy of Holies will be desecrated, its sacred vessels defiled or hauled off to decorate shrines built for foreign gods. The Ark of the Covenant, if it survives, will become an artifact, not a holy object. A curiosity in some foreign palace, stripped of power and meaning. Ezekiel describes the final assault like someone who has stood within the smoke. Babylonian soldiers flooding through broken walls, overwhelming every defense. No mercy for age or innocence. Children dying with their mothers' cloaks still in their grasp. Elderly men cut down in the doorways they once guarded. Young women taken and destroyed in ways worse than death. The streets of Jerusalem will flow with blood, and carrion birds will feast on the dead until they can fly no more. Some in the crowd clutch their ears. Others protest, saying he's gone too far, that God would never allow such disgrace to come upon his own people. A few demand signs, proofs, miracles to justify the horror in his words. But Ezekiel does not soften his tone. He does not offer comfort. He continues without pause, without apology. The survivors, he warns, will wish they had died. Those who escape the sword will be dragged to foreign lands, stripped of dignity, culture, and home. They will serve as slaves to those who care nothing for their heritage. Their children will grow up speaking Babylonian instead of Hebrew, pledging loyalty to Babylonian gods instead of the Lord of Israel. The treasures of the temple will adorn altars to drunkenness and idolatry. Sacred vessels will be used for heathen celebrations. The ark, if it remains intact, will no longer command reverence, but be viewed as a relic of a fallen people. Everything once held sacred will be desecrated. Everything once thought eternal will prove fragile and temporary, like mist fading in morning light. And yet, even in this avalanche of judgment, faint sparks of hope still glow. Exile, though brutal, will not last forever. Scattered though they are, the people will one day return. The temple will be rebuilt, though changed, and God's purposes will endure. But that promise is distant, buried beneath the shadow of imminent doom. His audience struggles to accept it. Some call him an alarmist, exaggerating the scope of what's possible. Others claim he's been influenced by Babylonian propaganda, that spies and enemies have filled his head with lies. A few assume he speaks out of bitterness, projecting his own suffering onto the nation. But Ezekiel is unmoved. He has seen what others haven't. The glory of God departing from the temple. The moral rot hidden behind sacred curtains. The long-suffering mercy of heaven pushed to its limit. His words don't come from hate, but from a desperate kind of love, a last, pleading hope that repentance might yet delay the inevitable. And his words are too precise to dismiss. He does not generalize. He names kings. He details events. He draws a timeline. His visions ring with the clarity of history before it unfolds. And that precision means everything. It will either prove him a true prophet or expose him as a fraud. There is no in-between. When his words end, silence falls over the marketplace. The chatter of trade, the clatter of carts, the calls of barterers fade to nothing beneath the weight of what he has said. Some shake their heads and walk away, muttering about false prophets. But others stay rooted in place, gazing at Ezekiel with a mixture of awe and dread. The sun sinks behind the hills, throwing long shadows over the dust. Tomorrow will bring more prophecies, more signs, more chances to awaken the spiritually numb before judgment crashes in like a storm. But for now, his words hang in the air, thick as smoke, bitter as ash. The fate of Jerusalem has been declared. The countdown has started. All that remains is to see whether the city will hear or sleep through its final alarm. The prophet has delivered his charge. The rest is no longer his to carry. Then comes the judgment of the leaders. Ezekiel's voice sharpens into flame. His anger becomes molten as he turns his full focus on those who should have protected the people, but instead devoured them. The shepherds of Israel have become predators, wolves disguised in robes of leadership. Their concern is not for the flock, but for their own appetites. Ezekiel's accusations strike like hammer blows on the anvil of corruption. And these are not foreign kings. These are not Gentile oppressors. These are Israel's own sons, the very men who were tasked with guiding, serving, and shielding the nation. Instead, they have fed off its weakness. From the throne room to the temple steps, from the courts of law to the stalls of the marketplace, leadership has rotted from the inside out. The kings are the first to stand condemned. They wear their crowns like war prizes, but think like criminals. They treat taxation like conquest. They draft laws for their own gain, while justice lies gasping beneath the rubble. Their palaces grow taller even as their people sink into poverty. They throw feasts while the nation fasts in fear. They celebrate while the foundations of their kingdom split apart. King Zedekiah, stands at the center of this divine indictment. A man of oaths, but none kept. He breaks promises like a child breaks sticks, recklessly and without regret. He signs treaties with both Babylon and Egypt, betraying each with the same cheerful dishonesty. His words are wind. His pacts are parchment soaked through with water. He mistakes manipulation for wisdom. He thinks strategy can substitute for obedience. He believes that shifting alliances will protect him from the consequences of moral collapse. But the corruption does not stop at the palace gates. It runs deeper still, and judgment is just beginning. The princes of Israel, those nobles who should have been wise counselors to the king, have instead become accomplices in the unraveling of the nation. They offer flattery in place of wisdom, enable injustice instead of restraining it, and chase profit rather than embracing service. The royal court has become a marketplace where every principle is for sale and nothing sacred retains its worth. The judges fare no better in Ezekiel's sweeping condemnation. They twist the law with the precision of a blacksmith bending iron, reshaping justice to fit their personal agendas. The rich walk away with favorable verdicts, while the poor are crushed beneath the weight of predetermined guilt. The scales of justice are not balanced. They tilt toward the highest bribe. Courtrooms have become elaborate stages where truth is acted out as a performance, but never genuinely pursued. Ezekiel's fury then falls upon the religious establishment, now hollow and corrupted. The prophets, once chosen to speak God's unfiltered truth, have instead turned to fabricating comfortable fantasies. They proclaim visions born of vanity, not revelation. Their dreams serve their egos, not the people. Peace, they say, when war is already at the door. Blessing, they whisper, when curse has already descended. Prosperity, they promise, even as judgment rises on the horizon. These false prophets smear plaster over foundational cracks, sealing them with illusions rather than truth. They paint over rust instead of scraping it clean. They prescribe gentle words for deadly wounds. When the people beg for bread, they hand them painted stones. When the nation thirsts for righteousness, they offer up dry wells filled with sand. The priests receive no less blame. Once guardians of the sacred, they now run a religious business. They have transformed the temple into a marketplace, trading sacrifice for silver and selling blessings to the highest bidder. The holy and the profane blur beneath their hands. They make no distinction between what is clean and what is defiled. The law has become soft clay, shaped to suit their ambitions. They eat the sin offerings, but ignore the sins. They collect tithes, but refuse to teach. They observe rituals, but forget righteousness. They maintain the sacred calendar, but neglect the sacred heart. They pass on tradition, but not transformation. Ceremony becomes a substitute for character. Ezekiel paints a brutal image: shepherds who devour the flock. They drink the milk, wear the wool, and butcher the strongest sheep to fill their own tables. Meanwhile, the weak are left unaided. The sick receive no healing. The wounded remain untreated. The lost stay lost. While the shepherds feast, the sheep scatter across hills and valleys, pursued by predators, with no one to search for them or shield them. On days of darkness and danger, when leadership is most needed, these shepherds vanish. But God is watching, and judgment is coming. The Lord declares that he will demand his flock back from their hands. He will hold them accountable for every life harmed through neglect or greed. The shepherds who fattened themselves while others starved will taste the hunger they once ignored. The princes will fall from their cushioned thrones into the dirt. The judges will face a courtroom where no bribes are accepted and no excuses are heard. The prophets who peddled lies will find their own words turned into swords against them. The priests will be stripped of their sacred robes and exposed to divine justice in the nakedness of their betrayal. Yet even this judgment is not merely punishment, it is preparation. It clears a path for new leadership, shepherds who reflect the heart of God. The Lord himself will take up the staff. He will seek out the lost, gather the scattered, bind the wounded, and strengthen the weak. He will lead his people to good pasture and shield them from harm. A new ruler will rise, one born from the lineage of David, but clothed in a righteousness that does not distinguish between rich and poor, powerful and helpless. This shepherd will nourish the people instead of consuming them. He will defend instead of exploit. He will serve rather than demand to be served. Ezekiel's condemnation of current leaders becomes a blueprint for renewal. In exposing what leadership should never become, he opens the way for what it must one day be. The dark judgment becomes a backdrop for the brightness of hope. The prophet's words echo across the exile camp like thunder rolling through the hills. The leaders he names are far away, unable to defend themselves, but those who once praised or benefited from them shift in discomfort. Everyone knows someone who has profited from injustice, turned a blind eye to suffering, or stood silently while others were crushed. The accusations hit home. Some nod, recognizing themselves in Ezekiel's critique. Others wonder whether any human leader could ever escape such failure. A few dare to ask the deeper question, what kind of shepherd will God himself be, if he truly takes the reins of his people's future? The answers are hidden in the chapters still unwritten. But the very promise of divine leadership brings a spark of hope to those who are tired of being devoured by those who were meant to protect. Then Ezekiel's gaze expands beyond the borders of Israel. His prophetic vision sweeps across the nations like a spotlight cutting through night. God's justice, he declares, does not end with his chosen people. It reaches to every kingdom, every culture, every nation that has laughed at Israel's fall. No land is too distant, no empire too mighty, no people too obscure to escape the scrutiny of the Almighty. First comes Ammon. East of the Jordan, they clapped and danced at the desecration of the temple. They shouted, "Aha!" when God's sanctuary was defiled, when Israel's land was laid bare, when its people were dragged into exile. Their mockery now becomes their sentence. Eastern raiders will sweep through their cities, leaving camel tracks where homes once stood. Their proud towns will become grazing pastures for sheep. They thought the desert was their protection, a natural moat that shielded them from Babylon's fury. But no distance is safe from divine wrath. What they celebrated will return to them with multiplied bitterness. They too will know exile. They too will taste ruin. They too will become a warning to others. Then comes Moab, another southern neighbor, equally proud, equally scornful. They claimed that Judah was now just like every other nation, no longer special, no longer chosen. They dismissed the covenant. They erased the uniqueness of Israel's relationship with God. And for that arrogance, they too are marked for destruction. Their cities will crumble. Their pride will be shattered. And their name, once spoken with confidence, will be forgotten, reduced to dust, erased by the very God they dared to mock. The Moabites placed their trust in high mountain fortresses and remote, hidden valleys, believing these ancient strongholds, along with the gods of their ancestors, would guard them as they had in the past. But no matter how tall the mountain or deep the gorge, no fortress can withstand the assault of divine siege engines. No valley, however remote, can escape the gaze of all-seeing eyes. No deity forged by human hands can stand in opposition to the Lord of hosts. The security they clung to will shatter like brittle clay beneath the blow of a hammer. Edom's guilt, however, runs deeper and demands a longer reckoning. As descendants of Esau, they were kin to Israel, bound by blood to the children of Jacob. But when Jerusalem was under attack, they stood by with folded arms, silent and satisfied, as strangers looted the city's treasures. Rather than offering help, they rejoiced over Judah's downfall and handed survivors over to the enemy. Instead of acting like brothers, they behaved like scavengers, profiting from a sibling's ruin. It was betrayal not only of kinship but of covenant obligation. When Jerusalem fell, Edom should have opened its borders, given food to the starving, and provided refuge for the fleeing. Instead, they blocked escape routes and turned fugitives over to Babylon's soldiers. Now, divine vengeance will reduce their land to ruin. From Timon to Dan, Edom will become a desolate wilderness. The sword of Israel itself will be the instrument of their undoing. Their highland fortresses will crumble into dens for jackals. Their once proud cities will echo only with the cries of owls and the flapping of raven wings. The people who refuse to be family will learn what it means to be utterly forsaken. Philistia, the ancient coastal adversary, is not forgotten either. For generations they have been driven by vengeance, harboring ancient grudges and striking at Israel whenever the opportunity arose. Their hatred has never cooled, and they have celebrated every misfortune that fell upon God's people as if it were a personal victory. They assumed that their access to the sea would offer protection, that their ships could carry them to safety if judgment ever arrived. They believed their fortified coastal cities would resist any attack, that their gods would once again deliver them. But the very hand that once allowed their victories will now orchestrate their fall. Their defenses will collapse. Their ships will be shattered. Their people will be scattered and cut off. These oracles against the surrounding nations do more than forecast destruction. They underscore the universal scope of God's justice. The reach of his judgment extends beyond his covenant people to touch every nation that has mocked or attacked Israel. No one who has reveled in Jerusalem's suffering will be spared. No kingdom that exulted in Israel's downfall will escape retribution. The God of Israel is not a local deity hemmed in by borders. He reigns over all creation. For the exiles who first hear these prophecies, the words are more than judgment, they are comfort. Their suffering has not been overlooked. Their enemies' laughter will not go unpunished. The justice that may feel delayed is only gathering strength. The same divine hand that scattered Israel will scatter its enemies in return. Each oracle follows a recognizable rhythm. First, the sin of the nation is identified, usually rooted in arrogance, violence, or mockery of Israel's pain. Then comes the proclamation of judgment, often in vivid and specific detail. And finally, there is an unmistakable acknowledgement. This judgment is not random. It is the work of Israel's God, asserting his rule over all peoples and powers. The cumulative message is unmistakable. No nation can mistreat God's people with impunity. Earthly decisions echo in eternal realms. Political moves carry spiritual consequences. International pride and cruelty will not be forgotten in the courts of heaven. One might ask why the God of Israel would bother himself with the affairs of foreign nations. The answer lies in his nature. As creator, his authority encompasses all peoples. As protector of Israel, he must hold its enemies accountable. And as righteous judge, he cannot ignore oppression wherever it appears. Even within these dark pronouncements, hints of hope glimmer. For when the oppressors fall, space is made for restoration. When enemies are removed, the path opens for Israel to rise again. When those who rejoice in suffering are silenced, the sufferers can begin to heal. Ezekiel speaks these international declarations with the same certainty and force as his messages to Israel. Distance does not limit God's justice. Language does not confuse his purpose. Idolatry does not dilute his power. The Lord who speaks Hebrew into Ezekiel's ear governs Babylonian kings and Egyptian pharaohs without effort or hesitation. These prophecies reveal the full scale of who God is. He is not a tribal god fenced into a homeland. He is a sovereign king with jurisdiction over every border. His justice is limitless. His power touches every throne. His knowledge sees every nation, every heart, every hidden sin. No power is out of reach. No people beyond accountability. Then the prophets gaze locks onto Tyre, the glittering jewel of the Mediterranean. She rises from the sea like a crown set in silver. Tyre, mistress of trade, queen of commerce, clothed in purple dye and cedar-scented wealth. Her ships crisscross oceans. Her influence stretches from east to west like the morning sun. Her pride towers as high as her lighthouses. But it is this very pride that seals her fate. Ezekiel's vision of Tyre's fall unfolds like an ancient elegy, a lament sung over beauty destroyed by its own arrogance. Beneath the shine of her polished stone, beneath the buzz of her thriving harbors, lies a core of corruption. Tyre has built her fortune on the collapse of others. She has rejoiced in ruin and multiplied profit through pain. When Jerusalem was brought low, Tyre's merchants celebrated. With the city's trade routes now cleared, they saw their chance to monopolize the market. Tyre's geography gave her confidence. Built partly on the mainland, partly on an island, she seemed invincible. The sea was her moat, her navy, her shield, her trade empire, a web of influence that made her seem untouchable. She played both sides in every conflict, sold weapons to enemies, shipped goods to the highest bidder. But divine judgment is not fooled by geography. The waters that once protected her will now rise up in wrath. Ezekiel proclaims that many nations will come against Tyre, like waves pounding the shore. Her walls will crumble. Her towers will fall. Her streets will be scraped clean until only bare rock remains, a place where fishermen stretch their nets, not a city that ruled the seas. He names Nebuchadnezzar as the first agent of her ruin. The Babylonian king will bring war horses, chariots, and siege engines. He will batter Tyre's gates, fill her alleys with the noise of war, and flatten her once mighty strongholds. The pillars of her wealth will collapse. Her defenders will be crushed beneath foreign hooves. Tyre's commercial empire becomes the centerpiece of a mournful inventory, like a ruined spreadsheet of a fallen business. Ships from Tarshish carry her goods. Sailors from Sidon and Arvad guide her through the waves. Elders from Gubal stitch her sails. Warriors from Persia, Lud, and put standguard. Her cargo includes everything from livestock and wheat to emeralds and coral, from honey and oil to fine embroidery and precious metals. The scope of her trade reveals not only her reach, but her dependence. Tyre thrived only when the world was stable. When war comes, her shipping lanes will die. Her trade will evaporate. Her alliances will turn on her. Her greatest strength, global connection, becomes her greatest vulnerability in crisis. The very lifeblood of her economy will turn cold. The lament continues, its poetic beauty sharpening the tragedy. Tyre is likened to a ship, grand, well-crafted, and majestic, now drifting toward disaster. Her pride once filled the sails, but now, no wind will save her. The ship of Tyre was crafted from the finest materials known to the ancient world. Its hull fashioned from cypress trees grown in the highlands of Sinir, its towering mast hewn from the proud cedars of Lebanon, its oars carved from Bashan's strongest oaks. The deck gleamed, inlaid with ivory that shimmered like bone polished by centuries. Its sails were woven from the softest Egyptian linen, pure and light, catching every breeze with grace, while its awnings, dyed in rich blues and deep purples from the coastlines of Cyprus, billowed like royal banners. Yet this magnificent vessel, this symbol of pride and power, is destined to break apart in the very heart of the seas. A fierce east wind will rise and shatter her into pieces, sending her treasures, her crew, and her opulence spiraling down into the deep. Her beauty will vanish like smoke. Her power will fade into legend. Her arrogance will serve as a stark warning to every nation that trusts more in riches than righteousness. The king of Tyre emerges in this lament as the very embodiment of hubris, a man who dares to lift himself to divine status. He imagines himself a god, enthroned in the heart of the oceans, cloaked in wisdom and swollen with wealth. He boasts that his understanding rivals the divine, that his throne is equal to those in heaven. His riches have become his mirror, reflecting not truth but delusion. In his mind, he is a sovereign beyond human boundaries, his intellect matching heavens, his rule mirroring God's. But the Lord declares what he cannot admit. He is but a man, not a god. And soon, strangers will draw their swords against his imagined brilliance. They will tear down his wisdom. They will destroy his form. He will die a violent death beneath the waves he claimed to command. His divinity will shatter under the gaze of those who come to kill. The prophecy then steps deeper into poetic mystery, describing this ruler not just as a man, but as a pattern of ancient perfection. Once full of beauty and wisdom, he is likened to a being in Eden, God's own garden, clothed in precious stones, walking among fiery stones on the mountain of God. He is depicted as an anointed cherub, a guardian of glory, radiant and pure, until corruption was found in him. Whether this is a portrait of the original fall of pride, a mythic reflection, or an allegorical echo, the message is crystal clear. Pride precedes destruction. The throne built on ego will be buried in ruin. What was once beautiful becomes grotesque when corrupted by self-worship. The lament draws to its devastating close. Tyre will become nothing more than a memory, a place feared, then forgotten. Her island strongholds will be scraped to bare rock, no longer a bastion of strength, but a barren place where fishermen spread their nets. Her cities on the mainland will fall into plunder, and her satellite villages will bleed under the sword. In her collapse, the world will be forced to admit, this is the judgment of the Lord. Nations will recoil in shock. Princes of the sea will rise from their thrones in trembling disbelief. Robes will be cast off, dignity abandoned. They will sit in the dust, stunned, muttering laments over the fall of a city that once ruled the waves. How, they will ask, could such a city fall? A city mighty on the seas, revered by all her trading partners, surrounded by every defense. Her fall will ripple outward like shock waves through still waters. If Tyre, wealthy, strong, untouchable, can be destroyed, what hope does any lesser city have? If the Queen of Commerce can drown beneath the waves, who among the mighty is safe? If her ships sink, what other fleets will remain afloat? Beneath this dirge lies a greater truth. Tyre's fate reveals a timeless pattern. Pride leads to downfall. Human kingdoms that build their foundations on gold instead of God, that trade righteousness for riches, that substitute wisdom from above with cleverness below, these will not stand. Tyre's collapse proves the instability of power disconnected from purpose. It shows that God governs the rise and fall of nations, that he lifts up and tears down according to justice. Babylon may be the tool he uses to destroy Tyre, but Babylon will face its own judgment in time. No empire, no matter how vast, escapes divine balance. Across the world, Tyre's merchants will weep, not because they loved her, but because their fortunes were tied to hers. Their sorrow is transactional, their grief economic. When profit vanishes, loyalty disappears. When trade collapses, relationships dissolve. In the wake of her fall, they will realize that wealth cannot secure permanence. Power, once thought indestructible, can vanish overnight. Cities, no matter how fortified, are but dust when pride is their cornerstone. Where once merchant princes walked with dignity, fishermen will now stretch their nets. Where once golden palaces stood, waves will wash over abandoned stone. The hum of markets will be silenced. Treasures once piled high will rot beneath the sand. Travelers will pass by and struggle to believe a great city ever stood here. Her destruction, thorough and irreversible, becomes a stage for a greater revelation. This judgment against Tyre is not isolated. It is a chapter in Ezekiel's larger message. A warning to Israel's enemies that God does not turn a blind eye. A comfort to Israel's exiles, reminding them that their oppressors will not escape. And a declaration that divine justice knows no national boundary. It is not reserved for the chosen. It is not confined to the covenant. It is universal. It is absolute. Tyre's downfall becomes an eternal parable. It echoes through history every time an empire crumbles, every time a kingdom collapses, every time wealth evaporates like mist. Her story is the story of every nation that believes itself invincible, every ruler who imagines himself divine. Her song of mourning is not a ballad buried in the past. It is a tune that plays in every generation, warning the proud, calling the wise to humility. And then the scene shifts. In the exile camp, silence settles like mist before dawn. The people carry on, tending gardens, repairing tools, instructing their children. But beneath the surface, a tension grows. Word from Jerusalem has ceased. The quiet itself screams. Something has happened. Something final. Ezekiel sits outside his home, staring at the empty horizon. No messengers come. No reports. Only silence. God has made him a watchman, tasked with sounding the alarm when danger approaches. But what does a watchman do when the danger has already arrived? What does he do when the city he was meant to warn has possibly already fallen? In the ancient world, the role of watchman was one of dire responsibility. Stationed high on the city's towers, he scanned the distant roads for shadows, for movement, for any sign of oncoming threat. His eyes were the defense of the people. His voice, their first chance at survival. His cry could mean the difference between preparation and devastation. His failure could lead to slaughter. Now, Ezekiel holds that weight in his spirit. He is the watchman of Israel. And even as the silence thickens, he knows the sword is near. And if he sees the sword coming and does not sound the trumpet, the blood will be on his hands. But if he cries out and the people refuse to listen, their fate is their own. Still, he must watch. Still, he must speak. Still, he must bear the burden, alone if necessary. The watchman knows that if he fails to sound the trumpet, if he stays silent when danger approaches, then the blood of those who die unprepared will be counted against him. But if he sounds the alarm and they refuse to listen, if they scoff or delay or turn away, then their blood is on their own heads. This divine commission places Ezekiel in an impossible position. The people he is called to warn are scattered throughout Babylon, far from the ruined walls of Jerusalem, drifting from the covenant that once shaped their lives. Many have concluded that the old ways no longer apply in exile, that faithfulness has no place in foreign soil. Some have embraced the customs of Babylon, taken foreign spouses, bowed to local gods. Others still go through the motions of worship, but their hearts are elsewhere. The form remains, but the spirit has faded. The message Ezekiel must bring offers no easy consolation for those looking to justify their compromise. For though God takes no joy in the death of the wicked, he will not ignore wickedness. The one who once lived righteously but turns aside to evil will not be spared for past virtue. The one who was once lost but turns to righteousness will live, regardless of former guilt. Each soul stands alone before God, measured not by family, not by community, not by tradition, but by personal choice. This divine standard of individual responsibility cuts directly against the grain of common belief. The exiles cling to the old saying, "The fathers eat sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge." They believe they suffer for sins they did not commit, that their pain is inherited injustice. But through the prophet, God makes his verdict unmistakable. Every person will be judged for their own deeds. The guilt of the father will not fall upon the son. The righteousness of the son will not redeem the father. Each one carries their own moral weight. This doctrine stuns the exiles. It terrifies them because it strips away every excuse, every inherited shield. But it also liberates them because it means that no past failure is final. No legacy of guilt can permanently define a soul. Repentance is still possible. Change is still within reach. Destiny can still be rewritten. Ezekiel bears this truth in isolation. His role as watchman separates him from the very people he serves. He belongs to them, yet walks apart. He is charged with responsibility, but not control. He can sound the alarm, but he cannot force the people to respond. He can describe danger, but he cannot make them flee. His own life has become a symbol of separation. The death of his wife, unmourned by divine command, has cut him off from the comforts of shared grief. His peculiar public behaviors, his unrelenting warnings, have made him a figure of confusion and discomfort. Children avoid his gaze. Neighbors whisper when he walks past. Other priests regard him with suspicion, fearful that proximity to his strange calling might taint their own reputations. And yet, Ezekiel endures, because he must, because silence, in the face of what he knows, would be betrayal. If he remains quiet while sin grows, the blood of the fallen will cry out against him. If he fails to speak while the people slide toward destruction, their deaths will haunt his soul. If he abandons his post, the very community he was tasked to protect will suffer consequences they never saw coming. The weight grows heavier with every day of silence from Jerusalem. Has the city fallen? Has the temple been reduced to rubble? Have his dire visions become grim reality? Or has nothing happened, and his prophecies proved false, his ministry a mistake, his warnings just noise in the wind? The not knowing becomes its own torment. Sometimes he wonders if God has forgotten him, left him to watch over a people that may no longer even exist. Other times he fears that his messages have been too harsh, that his zeal has pushed people further from God rather than drawing them close. The burden of bearing responsibility for other souls presses down with suffocating weight. But in those moments of doubt, he remembers the vision, the glory by the river Kabar, the voice that called him, the command to speak regardless of response. He remembers that the fire did not consume him, but filled him. He remembers that God promised to be with him, even if everyone else turned away. The silence may endure, but it will not last forever. The task of the watchman goes beyond warnings. It includes guidance, encouragement, the tender work of restoring broken spirits. When someone seeks help with honest intent, Ezekiel must offer them light. When a soul turns in repentance, he must declare God's readiness to forgive. When a weary heart wonders if their righteousness still matters, he must remind them that perseverance is not forgotten. This dimension of the calling brings moments of relief. Not every word must be fire. Some words are balm. Some are seeds of hope planted in dry ground. Gradually, the exiles begin to see the heart behind the harshness. They recognize that Ezekiel speaks from compassion, not cruelty. His grim declarations are shaped by love, not disdain. His stern words hide a soul that grieves deeply for their loss, that longs for their return to the God who still waits for them. As another evening falls, Ezekiel continues his vigil, eyes fixed on the fading horizon, scanning for any sign of a messenger. He does not know when news will come, but he will be ready. His eyes may be the first to spot the approaching figure, his ears the first to catch the sound of urgent feet, his voice the first to interpret what has occurred, to give shape and meaning to the unthinkable. The burden continues, day by day, night after night, but he carries it without complaint. Someone must stand while others rest. Someone must stay alert while others assume the world is safe. Someone must watch when no one else wants to see. And then it happens. At sunset, a lone figure stumbles across the dust-choked plain, ragged, bent by exhaustion, covered in the filth of travel and the ash of grief. His clothing is torn, his face caked in grime. His eyes, those hollow, glassy eyes, speak of horrors too recent to be processed. Children see him first. They point and shout. Adults come from their tents, squinting into the dying light. Ezekiel rises from his place by the gate, where he has sat for months, unmoving, waiting. A chill runs down his spine. Something in the man's gait, in the dust rising behind him, tells him this is it. This is the moment. The answer. The fugitive collapses just outside the settlement, gasping, barely coherent. Water is rushed to his lips. Hands lift him gently. His chest heaves as he struggles for breath. And then, between coughing fits and broken whispers, the truth comes out. Piece by piece, shard by jagged shard, Jerusalem has fallen. The wall has been breached. The gates have been broken down, splintered like brittle wood. The buildings lie in smoldering heaps, reduced to rubble and ruin. Babylonian soldiers poured through Jerusalem like a torrent of floodwaters crashing through a breached dam, swallowing everything in their path. The temple, once the heart of a nation, once the meeting place between heaven and earth, is no longer damaged or desecrated. It is gone, not partially destroyed, not looted and left in ruin. It has been obliterated, leveled to dust and ash, erased from the skyline it once crowned for nearly 400 years. The people in exile gather in widening silence as the fugitive recounts the details. His voice, ragged with grief, trembles as he describes the last desperate act of King Zedekiah. Under cover of darkness, the king attempted escape through the garden gate. But Babylonian scouts caught him in the plains of Jericho. They brought him before the commander, forced him to watch his sons executed, one by one. And then, they put out his eyes, ensuring the last thing he would ever see was the death of his lineage. Bound in chains, he was led away into captivity, a broken man whose pride, power, and posterity had all been stripped away. The temple treasures are gone, not hidden or safeguarded, but paraded off to decorate the shrines of Babylon's idols. The bronze pillars that once stood as symbols of divine permanence now lie shattered and dragged away as scrap metal. The golden utensils that had once cradled holy offerings now serve unclean purposes in foreign temples. That which was sacred has been desecrated. That which was pure has been defiled. The lines between holy and profane have been obliterated. Most of the city's population is either dead or vanished. Some perished in combat atop the ramparts. Others starved to death during the long siege. Still more were executed after the final breach. Those who survived were herded into chains and scattered throughout the sprawling Babylonian Empire. Families have been split. Entire communities erased. The fabric of Israel's society has been ripped apart beyond recognition. The fugitive's report confirms, point by point, the terrifying accuracy of every prophecy Ezekiel has spoken. The siege, the starvation, the horrors of cannibalism, the final violent assault, they all happened just as foretold. Every corrupt ruler the prophet named has fallen. Every false prophet has been silenced. The priests who defiled their office have vanished with the temple they betrayed. Judgment has come, and it has left nothing untouched. But the greatest shock among the exiles is not the news of the king or the dead. It is the destruction of the temple. Many had assumed, even as they wandered in foreign lands, that surely God would never allow his holy house to be annihilated. They thought the palace might burn, the walls might crumble, but the sanctuary? That, they believed, would be preserved. The brutal reality proves how deeply they had misunderstood the gravity of their rebellion. God had not been absent, he had been provoked. Ezekiel listens, emotion tightening in his chest. There is no satisfaction in vindication. His words have come true, but at a price too great to bear. His credibility is now undeniable, but the confirmation carries no pleasure. The accuracy of his calling has led directly to the sorrow of his people. No joy accompanies this fulfillment. Around the fugitive, the crowd thickens. People press in, some looking for news of family, others desperate to understand what remains of their city. Merchants whisper anxiously about their lost investments. Mothers weep for children they may never see again. The exile camp, once filled with hopeful rumors, now hums with mourning and disbelief. Some stand in stunned silence. Others wail, releasing grief that has built for months. A few lash out in confusion, asking why God allowed such ruin to come upon his chosen ones. And in the midst of them all, something changes in Ezekiel. For months, by divine command, His mouth has been sealed, his speech restricted to appointed moments. His tongue has been like stone, bound to silence unless God gave utterance. But now, as the last embers of Jerusalem's flame fade, the binding is broken. The prophet finds his voice. It rises like a river finally freed, surging with clarity and purpose. And what he speaks is not more judgment, but something new. He speaks of restoration, of hope, of a future not yet seen but deeply promised. The same voice that declared Jerusalem's ruin now proclaims its eventual renewal. The same lips that warned of exile now point to return. This moment marks a profound shift in Ezekiel's calling. The first chapter has closed. The chapter of warning, of symbolic acts, of cries no one wanted to hear. Now comes the work of rebuilding hearts, of comforting the shattered, of preparing a broken people to believe again. The fugitive's appearance does more than deliver a message. It verifies the prophet's authority. It erases all doubt. No longer can Ezekiel be dismissed as a madman with theatrical habits. No longer can his visions be brushed aside. He has spoken the truth in full. Every detail has come to pass. The exiles are forced to face a new reality. No swift return. No miraculous reversal. No more pretending this is temporary. The comfort of false hope has been stripped away, leaving only the raw truth. And yet, in this devastation, something beautiful stirs. If judgment has been complete, then perhaps it is finished. If destruction has been total, perhaps it has cleared the ground for rebuilding. If exile has done its work, perhaps mercy is now at the door. Ezekiel begins to sow these seeds cautiously. He does not promise these. He does not suggest the return will be soon. The road ahead will be long, paved with tears and toil. But the destination is sure. Restoration will come, not because Israel deserves it, but because God is faithful. Not because the people have earned it, but because God's covenant endures even after kingdoms fall. The sun disappears below the horizon as the fugitive concludes his tale. The sky darkens, but this darkness feels different. It is not the suffocating black of dread. It is the quiet veil before a new dawn. It is the stillness before the first word of a new beginning. Jerusalem has fallen, but Israel still lives. The temple is gone, but God is still present. The monarchy has ended, but the covenant has not. The news is terrible, but it is not the end. And as Ezekiel speaks these truths, another prophecy begins to take shape. The false shepherds, the careless leaders who scattered the flock, have failed. But the true shepherd will rise. God himself will gather his scattered sheep from distant nations. No longer will unfaithful hands guide his people. The shepherd of heaven will take up his staff and walk among them. He will feed them, heal them, carry them home. This divine promise comes like oil poured on wounded spirits. In the silence after devastation, it flows gently, soaking into parched hearts. The shock has passed. The mourning has begun to settle. And now, the question the people are ready to ask, what comes next, is finally being answered. Ezekiel's voice carries a new tone. The harsh fire of judgment softens into the warmth of coming light. The prophet who once built clay cities only to destroy them now speaks of cities rebuilt. The man who shaved his head in mourning now speaks of healing. The one who declared exile now speaks of homecoming. The watchman who once cried out warnings of advancing enemies now lifts his voice to proclaim the approach of a protector. His rebuke against Israel's failed leadership remains as piercing and unflinching as ever. These so-called shepherds have not cared for the flock. They have indulged themselves while the sheep went hungry. They feasted on the fat of the land and wore garments made from the wool of their sheep. Yet they ignored the broken and did not heal the wounded. They ruled not with gentleness, but with cruelty, scattering rather than gathering, driving the people away instead of drawing them near with care. When shepherds abandon their calling, it is the sheep who suffer most. Israel's people have become prey to wild beasts, vulnerable and alone, because no one went searching when they strayed. They have been dispersed across far-off lands because no one cherished the flock enough to keep them united. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, thirst parched their mouths, and despair took root in their hearts because no shepherd led them to green pasture or clean flowing water. But this neglect, this dereliction of duty, will not last forever. God himself declares that he will rise and take up the shepherd's staff. He will become the one who seeks out his sheep, searching for them with the fierce devotion of a shepherd on the day when his flock has been scattered by storm and threat. He will not rest until every lost one is found. On that day of thick cloud and looming darkness, no place will be too distant, no terrain too rugged, no soul too far gone for the divine shepherd to reach and rescue. The promise is not vague or symbolic. It's tangible, grounded in real hope, anchored in physical and spiritual restoration alike. God vows to gather his people from all the nations where they have been dispersed, to return them to the land they remember not just with their minds, but in their very bones, from the hills and valleys sung about in lullabies, from the waters their ancestors once drank. There, in their ancestral home, he will feed them again, on the mountain tops of Israel, in pastures thick with grass, beside clear running waters. This restoration is not merely a return to a homeland. It's the rekindling of their identity, their renewal as a people with purpose and sacred calling. He will search tirelessly for the lost, gather the strayed, bind the broken limbs, and give strength to the weary. But to those who grew fat by trampling others, who gained power by preying on the weak, he will bring not comfort, but justice. They will be fed, yes, but fed with justice, not indulgence. This renewal reaches far deeper than just survival. It reshapes the very order that once allowed injustice to fester. No longer will the strong push aside the weak, muddying the waters they themselves will not drink. No longer will some sheep grow fat while others starve. No longer will fear rule and injustice thrive. A new shepherd will be raised up by God's own hand, one in the likeness of David, not in name only but in heart and soul. This leader will not dominate or exploit, but care and provide. He will know each sheep as a shepherd knows the bleat and stride of his flock, and he will lead them with a gentleness born of strength and love. The covenant, once fractured by rebellion and exile, will be mended and made whole again. God will dwell among his people as their God, and they will be his people, not in form or name only, but in spirit and in truth. The bond forged in wilderness, broken in disobedience, and tested in exile will be restored, stronger and more enduring than before. Past failures will be forgiven. Present wounds will be healed. Future hopes will be made secure. Even the land will be transformed in this divine embrace. Wild beasts will vanish. The wilderness will become a safe haven. People will rest under trees, sleep in the woods without fear, and walk unafraid through the places they once fled. God will pour out blessings on the land as well as the people. Rain will fall in its season. The trees will yield their fruit, the soil will answer with abundance, and livestock will thrive. The imagery speaks powerfully to a people whose history is tied to the land, whose ancestors plowed fields and raised flocks and knew that harvest depended not on their own strength, but on the mercy of the heavens. These exiles, who now labor in foreign fields for foreign masters, will again eat from the fruit of their own land, till their own soil, live on ground their ancestors walked. And in this restoration, economic peace will accompany physical safety. No longer will they be subject to foreign rulers' whims or treated as pawns in the games of empires. The shame of exile will be replaced with the dignity of restoration. Nations that once laughed at Israel's downfall will witness their renewal. Those who were mocked will be honored. Those who were shackled will dance home in freedom. The story that once seemed destined for a tragic end will be rewritten with purpose, with promise, with peace. Yet even this great return comes with expectations, with sacred responsibilities. The people must not forget the lessons of their exile. They must follow the shepherd who calls them, walk in the compassion he shows, and refuse to repeat the indifference that scattered them in the first place. No more shall the vulnerable be trampled. No more shall the weak be ignored. To those who feel abandoned in a foreign land, Ezekiel's words bring deep, trembling hope. They are not forgotten. They are not orphans on the wind. They are beloved sheep, momentarily scattered, but destined to be regathered. Their current suffering is not the final word. It is not punishment, but discipline, a refining fire that purifies rather than consumes. Their exile is not the epilogue, but a chapter in a larger story that is moving, steadily and surely, toward homecoming. Ezekiel sees this vision more clearly than his hearers. Hope clashes with despair in their hearts. Some have adapted so completely to Babylon that the thought of returning feels like a loss. Others have sunk so deeply into hopelessness that the promise of restoration sounds more like cruelty than comfort. But Ezekiel refuses to relent. He continues to speak because he has seen the truth. The same voice that pronounced judgment has now spoken restoration. The same God who scattered the people will regather them. The same judge who punished will now rescue. The shepherd who watched his sheep scattered will gather them with his own hands and carry them to safety. And if God will be their shepherd again, then what other bonds might be healed? If the land will bear fruit once more, what new blessings might arise? If the covenant will be renewed, what new glories might unfold between God and his people? These are the questions that hang in the air, unanswered for now, but charged with possibility. And then the vision changes. The hand of the Lord lifts Ezekiel and carries him to a valley so bleak it silences every thought. It stretches out wide, lifeless, a sea of death frozen in time. The ground is not littered with the aftermath of one battle. It is filled with bones, countless bones, scattered and cracked, not gently buried but left to bleach under the merciless sun. They lie where they fell, dried and lifeless, stripped by vultures in time. No grave markers stand. No names are remembered. It is as if an entire people had perished and been forgotten. A whole nation, reduced to silence and dust. This is not simply a battlefield. This is the resting place of hope itself. And yet, even here, God speaks. The bones lie strewn across the valley, separated and disjointed, scattered like forgotten memories. Femurs rest far from their matching hips. Skulls lie detached from spines. Ribs form chaotic arcs in the dust, parted from the spines they once encased. Hands, those same hands that once held children, offered comfort, or raised in praise, are now spread apart from arms, lying idle in the silence. God leads his prophet slowly among these remains, walking him back and forth through the valley's desolation, making him see, truly see, the full breadth of the devastation. These bones are not just lifeless. They are dry beyond measure, weathered and bleached by sun and age, hollowed by time until they resemble relics more than remains. Whatever life once filled them has long since vanished, replaced by silence and dust. These are not merely bones. They are the silent testimony of a story cut off in its prime, a people left unfinished. Then the question comes, direct and unflinching, from the mouth of the Lord himself. Son of man, can these bones live? The very idea sounds absurd. Nothing about this scene suggests the faintest pulse of life. The depth of decay, the sheer finality of it all, screams that the story has ended. Nothing could survive such separation, such abandonment. Yet Ezekiel has learned the hard way that divine logic does not bend to human categories. He doesn't answer with analysis or doubt. Instead, with humility and reverence, he replies, "O sovereign Lord, you alone know." He places the impossible possibility back in God's hands, acknowledging what every prophet must, that God's power is not measured by human imagination. And then the command comes, not to question, not to analyze, but to speak, to prophesy, to lift a voice into the silence and direct it toward the bones as though they could understand, as though scattered ribs and skulls could listen and respond. Speak life into what death has claimed. Command restoration into that which has collapsed. It is as ridiculous as it is sublime. Yet Ezekiel obeys, as he always has, even when the task defies comprehension. He opens his mouth and speaks into the valley of death. The effect is immediate and staggering. The silence is broken, not by birds or wind, but by sound. A strange, deep noise rises from the ground. Rattling, clicking, grinding, bone moving toward bone, drawn together with divine precision. Femurs snap back into place with hip sockets. Vertebrae stack and straighten. Skulls nestle atop necks. Ribs curl around emptiness soon to be filled. Order emerges from chaos. A skeleton army takes shape. Next comes sinews, wrapping the bones like cords on a mast, tethering structure to form. Then muscle and flesh, thickening the shapes, layering identity over frame. And finally, skin, pale, complete, and whole. What was once a scattered ruin now lies full-bodied across the valley floor, countless human forms lying still as if asleep. But they are still just that, forms. Whole in appearance, yet motionless. Silent, lifelike, but not alive. Perfect anatomy, but no breath, no spirit, no heartbeat. Their restoration is incomplete. So God commands again, and this time the target is not the bones, but the breath itself. Prophesy to the breath, he says. Call to the four winds. Say, "Come, O breath, and breathe on these slain that they may live." The Hebrew word here, ruach, means breath, wind, and spirit all at once. It is not simply air that these bodies need. It is the essence of life, the animating presence that only God can give. What made Adam more than clay and Eden now prepares to fill this lifeless multitude. Ezekiel obeys. He speaks once more. And this time, something even more miraculous unfolds. The breath comes, not from one direction, but from all sides at once, sweeping across the valley like a divine windstorm. It enters the lungs of the lifeless. Hearts begin to thud. Lungs gasp for air. Fingers twitch. Eyes open. The stillness vanishes, replaced by stirring movement. The once scattered bones now stand upright. Countless multitudes risen from the dust. Not a scattered few, not a token remnant, but a vast and mighty army. Once dead, now alive. Then comes the explanation. God tells Ezekiel exactly what this means. These bones are not just symbols, they are Israel. All of it. The entire people. They see themselves as this valley, dry, broken, cut off. They say, "Our bones are dried up. Our hope is gone. We are completely cut off." They believe their story has ended, that God has turned away, that the covenant has crumbled, that exile is a burial. But the Lord declares otherwise. He says he will open their graves, that he will bring them up, not just back, that he will place his own spirit in them so they may truly live, not just as bodies in a land, but as a people filled with purpose and identity. He will lead them back to their land, and they will know, not guess, not hope, not wonder. They will know that the Lord has spoken and the Lord has acted. Resurrection is not a metaphor. It is a promise. This vision strikes at the heart of the exiles' despair. They have lost more than land. They have lost self-understanding. Their rituals are broken. Their lineage feels irrelevant. Their prayers feel unanswered. They feel erased from history and forsaken by heaven. But God shows them, through Ezekiel, that this death is not terminal, that what looks like ruin can become revival, that the grave is not the final word. The Creator who once shaped a man from dust now shows he can restore a nation from dry bone. The one who breathes stars into space can breathe hope into hopelessness. The power that called light from darkness now calls life from death. The vision, however, does not skip the process. Restoration is not instant. It comes in waves, in patterns. First bone to bone, then sinews, then flesh, then breath. Structure, then strength, then form, then spirit. A slow and deliberate reawakening. And the key to this entire process is prophetic proclamation. Nothing moves until Ezekiel speaks. The bones do not rise. The breath does not come. The army does not stand. Divine action is real, but it flows through human obedience. God partners with human voices to manifest supernatural outcomes. Even resurrection waits for a prophet's voice. Some in the crowd may wonder, is this literal? Will the dead truly rise from graves? Or is this a vision of national rebirth? Ezekiel makes it clear, this is about Israel's restoration as a people. But the imagery transcends any single interpretation. It becomes a timeless truth. It speaks to all who feel broken, scattered, or beyond repair. It speaks to generations who feel forgotten. It speaks to nations lost in shame, to hearts buried under years of pain. Because no matter how dead something seems, how far gone, how dismantled, how forgotten, God can breathe life back into it. This vision shouts that no defeat is final, no exile permanent, no silence eternal. The great army now standing proves that God's restoration is not reluctant or partial. It is total. It is abundant. It is generous beyond expectation. What he rebuilds surpasses what was lost. What he restores outshines what fell. What he resurrects carries more glory than what first stood. And in this moment, this breathtaking, valley-wide transformation, Ezekiel's audience sits in stunned stillness. Not from doubt, but from awe. Not because they can't believe, but because they're beginning to. For the first time in years, the question of, can these bones live, is not rhetorical. It's hopeful. The two sticks become one. Sometimes, It's the quietest gestures that hold the weight of eternity. Ezekiel stands silently before the gathered exiles, holding in his calloused hands 2 ordinary sticks, simple pieces of wood no different from what a child might gather absent-mindedly from the ground. On their own, they are unremarkable, but in the prophet's hands, worn by years of vision and obedience, they are transformed into symbols of something ancient and aching, a hope buried deep within Israel's collective memory. One stick is marked with the name of Judah, representing the southern kingdom and those still tied to the house of David. The second bears the name of Joseph, symbolizing Ephraim and the scattered tribes of the northern kingdom. 2 broken halves of a once whole nation, held apart by centuries of division, rivalry, and exile. Slowly, deliberately, Ezekiel brings the sticks together. His movement is solemn, nearly liturgical. As the 2 pieces of wood touch and remain joined in his grasp, the exiles lean forward, breath held. They understand now, without explanation. These years under strange skies have taught them to see beyond what the eyes behold. The prophet begins to speak, and his voice carries across the barren settlement like a stream flowing through wilderness. The Lord has spoken. The tribes of the north, scattered like dust by the Assyrian winds, will be gathered again. The people of Judah, bruised and displaced by Babylon's might, will be restored. The chasm will close. But this reunion is not merely geopolitical. It runs deeper than territory, older than monarchy. The prophet speaks of inner renewal, of hearts no longer divided by idolatry or fear, of spirits made clean from within. No more divided loyalties, no more false gods. One nation, one God, one shepherd to lead them home. And this shepherd, he is no ordinary ruler. He bears the name of David, not as a reference to a tomb or a history book, but as a promise reborn. He will not be a mere figurehead, but a true king after God's own heart, carrying David's justice, David's compassion, David's devotion to the Lord and to the people. Under his reign, tribes once alienated will become brothers again. Ezekiel goes further. This transformation is not just social or structural. It will reach into the very core of human nature. Hearts of stone, calloused by years of trauma, betrayal, and sin, will soften and come alive, beating with tenderness again. Obedience will no longer be a burden, but a joy. God's Spirit will dwell not beside them, but within them. Even the land will change in response. Mountains that once bore the stench of false worship will blossom with righteousness. Valleys that echoed with sorrow will be filled with rejoicing. The earth itself will participate in this restoration, responding with generous harvests, with fertility and beauty that speak of heaven's nearness. Old wounds will be dressed with mercy. Jealousies that tore brothers apart will dissipate like fog in the morning sun. The rivalry that split a kingdom under Solomon's sons will be remembered only as a lesson of the past. In its place will rise a new community, one not bound by shared borders alone, but by a shared heart. Even worship will be unified. No longer will there be separate temples or contested rites. A single sanctuary will stand as the center of spiritual life. The festivals will no longer highlight difference. They will pull every tribe, every family, every remnant into rhythms of joy and celebration. The covenant itself will undergo a breathtaking transformation. No longer will it be etched in cold stone. It will be inscribed on warm, beating hearts. What God commands will align with what his people now desire. Obedience will become an echo of love. Ezekiel's words pour into the hearts of the exiles like fresh rain on parched soil. They, who have tasted the bitterness of separation, who know the pain of being forgotten, feel something stir. They've seen what happens when people are scattered, how purpose withers, how identity fades. Now, they hear a promise that goes beyond repair. It speaks of recreation. This restoration will not be a reassembly of broken things, but the birth of something entirely new. The 2 sticks remain joined in the prophet's hand as he finishes. The moment imprints itself into memory. Years later, when these exiles tell their children the stories of survival, they will recall the day when Ezekiel held those 2 sticks together, when, for the first time in generations, the people glimpsed the miracle of unity. And hope, fragile and persistent, begins to circulate among them. Maybe the separation wasn't the final word. Maybe home is more than a fading dream. But not every vision leads toward peace. Ezekiel's eyes narrow as his gaze shifts toward something darker. He speaks now of Gog, a name shrouded in mystery, emerging from the land of Magog. The scene he paints is not of present danger, but of a distant reckoning, an ominous storm brewing on the edge of the restored world. In the vision, Israel has returned. The cities are rebuilt. The flocks graze freely. The people live in unwalled peace, unafraid of enemies, unaware of shadows. Into this stillness charges an unholy force. Gog leads a confederacy of nations with names strange and foreign. Meshech and Tubal march in formation. Persia brings its steel. Ethiopia and Libya join the call. Even distant coastlands send their warriors. An avalanche of soldiers spills across the earth, darkening valleys, trembling the ground, flooding the sky like a storm cloud of iron. But heaven is not caught off guard. The God of Israel has seen every move. The invasion is not an ambush. It is a trap set by divine hands. God believes in his own strategy, but he walks the path set before him by the Lord of hosts. As his armies sweep toward Israel's fields, the sky roars in answer. The earth itself revolts. Earthquakes rupture the ground. Mountains crack. City walls crumble into dust. Fire falls like judgment incarnate. Hailstones the size of beasts plummet from the clouds. Disease strikes suddenly, mowing down ranks like grass before a blade. Panic spreads. Confusion reigns. Soldiers turn on one another, swords clashing against familiar faces. Brothers fall by their own hands. The invincible host dissolves in hours. Their weapons will be collected and burned for years. Their bodies will fill graves that take 7 months to complete. Birds will feast where kings once plotted. Why this terrifying vision now? After so much hope, so much promise. Because peace, to endure, must be defended. Restoration must be tested. Unity must face its enemy. True peace comes not simply from the absence of conflict, but from the defeat of every threat that would undo what God has restored. The settling of every threat reveals one fundamental truth. The future safety of God's people will never rest on human strength, military alliances, or fortified walls. Their protection lies entirely in divine hands. The vision Ezekiel sees offers more than warning. It unveils something profound about God's relationship with history itself. Even the most violent, hostile forces end up serving his ultimate purposes. Gog may arrive as a terror, a dark invader bent on destruction, but in God's design, he becomes a tool, an unwitting instrument of divine self-revelation. Through Gog's downfall, not only will Israel recognize the might of their God, but every surrounding nation will witness the reach and absolute sovereignty of the Lord of hosts. This prophecy, cloaked in mystery, moves with a rhythm that feels timeless. Its layers ripple outward like waves on deep water. Some scholars see Gog as a stand-in for historic enemies. Others recognize a recurring pattern, a symbolic blueprint for how evil always rises and falls. Still others glimpse cosmic echoes, signs of the final confrontation between good and evil on a scale beyond mortal comprehension. The names are elusive, the imagery otherworldly, and the time frame stretches beyond human chronology. It's as if Ezekiel is being shown something that shatters the bounds of ordinary time, a vision not just for his day, but for all generations. And yet, for all its mystery, the heart of the message beats clear and sure. No force, however vast or ancient or terrifying, can stand against the people once God has restored them. No enemy's numbers can overcome divine promise. No blade of man can cut through God's purposes. Gog becomes the final bookend to the story of redemption. First comes return, the exile reversed, cities rebuilt, hearts restored, covenant renewed. Then comes the great test, a foreign army, an overwhelming threat, a trial by fire that reveals where real safety resides. For those listening in exile, this future vision brings immediate comfort. If God can obliterate the greatest enemy yet to come, then surely he has the strength to lead them home. If he can shake the earth to defend his people in that final hour, he can break the chains of Babylon now. Ezekiel's voice fades into quiet. The strange vision ends, but its images linger like ash on the wind. Gog and Magog will echo through future generations, remembered not only as symbols of hostility, but also as proof that no darkness endures when God rises to defend. Their names will become shorthand for every power that sets itself against God's will, and every power that ultimately falls beneath his justice. A new vision begins. It has now been 25 years since Jerusalem's walls collapsed in smoke and fire. Ezekiel is older. His beard is gray, his back stooped. The youthful priest who once walked Solomon's temple is now a prophet seasoned by decades of sorrow and endurance. But on this particular day, something shifts. The air holds new promise. The calendar itself bears significance. It marks the beginning of a jubilee year, the sacred time when slaves are freed, debts forgiven, and lost inheritances restored. On this day of divine reset, God lifts Ezekiel's eyes toward a vision unlike any before. Once more, the hand of the Lord comes upon him. Yet this time, it brings not a whirlwind, but clarity. Not terror, but structure. Not destruction, but architecture. There is no rush of divine fire or sudden upheaval, only the steady, deliberate precision of divine planning. God is not showing Ezekiel a threat. He is showing him a future. The prophet is transported, lifted, carried through dimensions of time and space, and finds himself standing atop a very high mountain, gazing down on a city that feels familiar but utterly transformed. It resembles Jerusalem, yet it surpasses all memory. A radiant figure approaches, gleaming like burnished bronze. He glows with a light that isn't of this world. In his hands, he carries tools, a flax line, and a measuring reed. This is no ordinary man. He has come to take Ezekiel through a tour, not just of a building, but of an idea, a divine design laid out in sacred dimensions. Son of man, the figure commands with solemn authority. Look with your eyes, hear with your ears, and set your heart on all that I show you. You were brought here so I could show you. Declare everything you see to the house of Israel. The instruction is clear: observe, absorb, and proclaim. This is no mere vision to inspire hope. It is a blueprint for the future, a detailed plan for a sacred space that will redefine worship itself. Spread out before him is a temple complex so vast, so intricate, it defies comparison. Courts within courts, rooms branching into rooms, sacred pathways stretching beyond sight. Everything glows with intention. There is no randomness here, only divine geometry. The man begins to measure, and Ezekiel follows, noting each dimension, each length and height and width. The walls soar like mountain cliffs. The gates shimmer in the light, catching the sun in their inlaid metalwork. And with every corner they turn, the design reveals more precision. The harmony of it overwhelms the senses. Ezekiel sees that this isn't just about size. It's about order. Every space has a function. Every measurement carries meaning. The courts are arranged for purpose. The inner chambers serve the priesthood. The outer courts welcome worshippers. Even the decorations, the carvings, the inscriptions, the materials declare holiness. Nothing is haphazard. Every detail whispers, "This is sacred." The bronze man walks with certainty. He doesn't explore, he confirms. This vision doesn't grow as they walk. It already exists in the mind of God. He simply reveals it, one measurement at a time. And Ezekiel, wide-eyed and reverent, struggles to keep up. He's no longer just a prophet of judgment. He is now a messenger of divine architecture. This vision marks a pivotal moment in Ezekiel's journey. For years, he has spoken only of destruction, of sin, of rebellion, of cities brought low. The temple he once served is gone. The priesthood scattered. The rituals silenced. But now, he sees not just a replacement, but a reinvention. Not merely what was lost, but what will be. Not the ruins of Solomon's legacy, but the first beams of a future sanctuary crafted by God's own design. And in that towering vision of walls and gates, of courts and thresholds, hope returns not as a fleeting comfort, but as a promise laid in stone. The bronze figure's steady, deliberate pace continues through the vision, and Ezekiel gradually understands that he is witnessing the long-awaited answer to the exile community's deepest questions. Where will God reside when the people return? How will worship be restored? What will stand in place of the temple that was lost? The answers unfold before him, but not in ways that are easily grasped. These are answers that challenge the boundaries of comprehension. The process of measuring continues with the same unwavering precision as before. Every room, every gate, every courtyard is carefully examined and meticulously noted. Nothing is overlooked or hurried. The bronze figure seems intent on revealing every sacred inch of this immense space. And Ezekiel begins to realize that this vision is not merely meant for his enlightenment. It is an assignment, a sacred duty, a charge he must carry back to the people. What he is being shown must be remembered in its entirety. The figure leads him through a maze of passages, each one giving way to new chambers and courtyards. The temple complex opens like a sacred flower, slowly unfolding layer by layer before Ezekiel's eyes. They begin at the massive outer wall that defines the boundaries of the entire complex. The measuring reed, 6 cubits long, about 10 feet, is used to determine the wall's dimensions, exactly 1 reed thick and 1 reed high. The emphasis on divine symmetry is immediate. It speaks of order, of purpose, of perfection rooted in heaven. The eastern gate draws their focus next. The measurements here become even more intricate, almost rhythmic in their precision. The gateway itself spans 50 cubits in width and 25 in depth. Along the passage, 3 chambers flank each side, each chamber precisely 10 cubits square. Windows pierce the structure, not ordinary windows, but beveled, designed to channel light in very specific, meaningful ways. Even the ascent is intentional. 7 steps for the outer court, 8 for the inner court. These numbers are not arbitrary. 7 evokes the completion of creation, divine rest. 8 points to new beginnings, resurrection, and realities beyond human perfection. The architecture teaches, not just contains. The outer court stretches wide, paved with luminous stone, its perimeter lined with 30 chambers, each with a sacred function. The scale is immense, grand enough to host multitudes, yet carved with a sense of intimacy that invites individual communion. But it is the inner court that seizes Ezekiel's awe. Measurements tighten. Decorations multiply. Palm trees and cherubim embellish every wall, repeating in patterns that dance before the eye. These are echoes of Eden, signs of paradise returning, of divine presence restored. 3 gates give entry to this sacred zone: north, south, and east, each gate identical in structure, yet housing variations meant for discovery. The bronze guide doesn't miss a single post or threshold. Every measurement is spoken, every detail preserved. At the center of this holy space stands the altar, but it is no ordinary altar. It rises in tiers, each level precisely defined, echoing the form of an ancient ziggurat. Yet this step-like mountain does not speak of reaching heaven through human pride, but of divine descent through grace. Even the corners of the inner court are given purpose, kitchens where priests will prepare offerings. These functional spaces, too, are measured in exact detail. The guide shows Ezekiel their connection to storage areas, to drainage systems for blood and refuse. The very design embodies sacred order, ritual made clean and life-giving. At the heart of it all, the sanctuary looms like a holy mountain. Its scale exceeds Solomon's temple, but its proportions are familiar: 40 cubits long, 20 wide, 20 high for the holy place. The innermost chamber, the most holy place, forms a perfect cube, 20 cubits in all dimensions. But something has changed. Where once there was a veil barring the way, now wooden doors carved with palm trees and cherubim offer access. Light plays on their surfaces, making the carvings appear to shift and move. God's presence, while still sacred, is no longer entirely hidden. Surrounding this sanctuary are 3 levels of chambers, 30 rooms per story, 90 in total, each serving a sacred function. These rooms hold vessels, store garments, and offer spaces for priestly preparation. Above it all, the roof rests on beams of cedar, carved and decorated with motifs that speak of God's character. The cedar, impervious to rot, hints at the eternal. Palm trees signify righteousness. Cherubim mark God's guarding presence. Water appears subtly in this architecture. Channels, drains, and pools hint at what is yet to come. They suggest streams that will soon flow with power, cleansing, and life. The structure itself seems to anticipate divine vitality, not just for worship, but for the land it touches. Ezekiel starts to understand. This isn't merely a building. It is a declaration, a vision of what relationship with God is meant to be. The old temple had become corrupted, its sacredness eroded by ritual without heart. This one is safeguarded by design, each detail reinforcing spiritual purpose. The bronze figure leaves nothing vague. Every beam, every decorative motif is made known. When Ezekiel shares this vision, the people must see exactly what God desires to establish. Specific areas are designated for priests, the sons of Zadok alone, those who remained loyal when others fell away. Some rooms are for consuming sacred meals, others for changing garments, others still for preparing offerings. Even the floor plan becomes a lesson in holiness. It distinguishes the sacred from the ordinary, the clean from the defiled. Ezekiel is overwhelmed by wonder and reverence. The temple is vast, impossibly intricate, yet rooted in practicality. It is a sanctuary, but also a home for a renewed community, a place of God's presence, but also of human belonging. The architecture is theology made visible, law turned into space, holiness embedded in wood and stone. As he walks through its vast corridors, the sound of future worship seems to echo ahead of him. He is not just seeing structure. He is seeing what worship will become. Ceremony, once rigid and rote, now pulses with communion. Ritual becomes relationship. Even the priesthood is reformed. No longer will all of Aaron's descendants serve. Only the faithful line of Zadok will minister in this sanctuary, those who stood firm when the nation strayed. The altar now takes its place as a central feature in this sacred vision, and only the faithful may enter the inner court to serve. These are the priests of the line of Zadok, those who remained steadfast during Israel's darkest hours. Their unwavering loyalty has earned them privileges in this new age of restoration. Unlike the ornate and ceremonial garments of past generations, these priests will dress in linen plain, clean, and practical. No wool may touch their bodies while they minister, for wool induces sweat, and sweat symbolizes human effort rather than the free-flowing grace of God. Even their attire becomes a lesson in theology. Their grooming, too, carries symbolic weight, not shaven bald like pagan priests, nor grown wild like Nazarites, but trimmed with moderation, reflecting a balance born from wisdom and tested through suffering. They stand as representatives of a people who have come to understand that truth often lives between extremes. The rituals they enact retain familiar rhythms. Morning and evening offerings continue as they once did, but with deepened meaning. The animals presented are not only physically unblemished, they represent lives purified, consecrated wholly to divine purposes. And in this renewed order, there will be a prince. He is not a king in the traditional sense, nor is he a priest, but rather a bridge between sacred and secular. This prince will provide sacrificial animals, sponsor sacred festivals, and ensure uninterrupted worship. Yet even he cannot cross into the inner court. His authority, however honored, must yield before the boundaries of holiness. On Sabbaths, he enters through the eastern gate, a gate otherwise sealed, and worships from its threshold while the people worship from the outer court. This arrangement affirms both his elevated role and his essential equality with all who seek God. Leadership here exists to serve worship, not replace it. The great festivals return with renewed depth. Passover is no longer only a remembrance of deliverance from Egypt, but a declaration of liberation from all that binds the human heart. The Feast of Tabernacles becomes more than a tribute to Israel's journey through the wilderness. It celebrates every soul's pilgrimage toward the eternal dwelling with God. Even the new moon marks more than the passage of time. It sanctifies time itself, dividing it into moments rich with sacred meaning. The calendar transforms into a sacred narrative, teaching the worshippers that God reigns over history itself. Sin offerings, long a central feature of temple worship, now emphasize not only individual guilt but collective responsibility. They acknowledge the shared burden of injustice, the communal nature of human brokenness. The priests who bear out these rituals carry the weight of the community's conscience. The bronze guide shows Ezekiel where these priests will dine, rooms not merely functional but designed to build community among those who serve, mirroring the unity they are meant to reflect to Israel. Kitchens appear in the outer court for in total, where Levites prepare offerings for the people. These spaces speak of shared celebration, festival atmosphere, and the joy of divine provision. Worship is no longer a solitary discipline, but a communal rejoicing. The most sacred meals, the sin and guilt offerings, must be eaten in the inner sanctum of the temple. This spatial limitation emphasizes the gravity of sin, the cost of atonement, and the immense privilege of those called to mediate between holy and profane. Geography itself becomes a vessel for theology. Cleansing rituals are renewed as well. The sanctuary must be purified regularly, not just through symbolic gestures, but through specific annual rites that remove the accumulated effects of human contact with holy space. Even the sacred requires purification in a fallen world. Instruction becomes as vital as sacrifice. The priests are charged not only with ritual duty, but with teaching. They must guide the people in the distinctions between sacred and common, clean and unclean. Their lives become the living curriculum of holiness. Even property laws underscore this divine order. The priests receive no territorial inheritance like other tribes. Instead, God provides for them through offerings and dedicated lands. Their security is communal, not personal. and their marriages must reflect the sanctity of their call. They may not marry divorced women or widows, except for the widow of another priest. Their private lives must echo the wholeness they represent in public worship. These rituals establish a rhythm to time itself. Daily offerings open and close each day. Weekly Sabbaths provide sacred pause. Monthly new moons realign the calendar to divine sovereignty. Annual festivals bridge sacred history with present hope. Time becomes sacred architecture, God's dwelling within the calendar, just as he dwells in the temple. Yet for all their structure and order, these rituals are not ends in themselves. They are frameworks for divine encounter. They do not exist to perfect performance, but to create space where God and his people may dwell together. Worship is no longer manipulation of divine favor, but an invitation to rest in the nearness of the Creator. Then the bronze figure leads Ezekiel to the eastern gate, the very same gate through which the divine presence once departed in judgment. But now, something begins to stir in the distance. A sound, not of absence, but arrival, builds like rushing waters. The very air trembles. Light pierces the horizon. No ordinary light, but brilliance that makes the sun itself seem pale. The ground vibrates underfoot. The voice Ezekiel first heard by the Chebar River, majestic, overwhelming, returns now, not with warning, but with welcome. Homecoming. And then, Ezekiel sees them. The living creatures, the same four from his earlier vision, appear once more. For faces, for wings, wheels within wheels, burning eyes woven through their forms. Their synchronized movement glows with divine fire, orchestrated perfection. Light scatters from their steps like flares of holiness. Above them, the throne appears again, crystalline, gleaming with otherworldly clarity, more solid than stone, more real than reality. And upon that throne, something waits, something more. The figure, radiant like a man surrounded by fire and rainbow brilliance, wears glory as though it were a robe woven from pure light. This is the kavod, the weight and substance of divine presence, returning at last to dwell in the midst of his people. The procession moves with stately calm, not hurried nor anxious, but with the assured cadence of sovereignty reclaiming what is rightfully its own. The wings of the living creatures beat in harmony, creating a rhythm that sounds like worship itself, as if creation were singing its welcome to the Creator's return. As the divine chariot draws near the temple, the eastern gate opens, not swung by hinges, but activated as if the very architecture recognizes the presence for which it was designed. Stone, wood, and metal align with purpose fulfilled. The glory pours through the gate, cascading into the courtyards, flooding every corridor, illuminating every chamber. What was once barren is now vibrant with the pulse of divine presence. What was void is now filled, saturated with sacred light. But this time, something new occurs. The chariot halts. The wheels cease their turning. The living creatures fold their wings. The movement of heaven gives way to the stillness of residence. God has come not to pass through, but to stay. Then a voice speaks, reverberating from deep within the sanctuary. Son of man, this is the place of my throne, the place where the soles of my feet shall rest, where I will dwell among the people of Israel forever. The words carry immense gravity. This is not a fleeting visitation, but a permanent enthronement. The divine promise is declared with firm resolve. No longer will this place be desecrated by idols or corrupted by kings buried too near its walls. Holiness will be guarded, purity preserved. Rebellion will not be allowed to drive away presence again. Ezekiel falls to his face, overcome by the glory, just as he did in that early vision by the Chebar River. Yet this time, the awe feels different. It's not the paralyzing fear of encountering overwhelming holiness for the first time, but the stunned reverence of witnessing promises fulfilled. The exile has ended, the relationship restored. The Spirit lifts him once more, setting him on his feet in the inner court, where every inch now pulses with divine radiance. Light saturates the sanctuary, and the building, once empty lines on a divine blueprint, has become the living house of God. This vision answers the exile's deepest cries. Where was God when the city burned? Why did he permit the destruction of his sanctuary? Had he truly forsaken his people? No. The absence was never abandonment. It was strategic, redemptive. The return of the glory makes that clear. This moment vindicates every strange prophetic act, every harsh oracle, every long-promised restoration. Ezekiel, once dismissed as delusional, now stands confirmed as the herald of divine truth. His words have found their fulfillment in fire and light. But the significance of this vision doesn't stop with personal vindication. The glory does not return to the old temple, reduced to rubble and dust. It fills the new sanctuary, a holy structure shaped not only by divine design but by transformed relationship. This isn't just the return of what was lost. It is the unveiling of something greater, a new covenant, a new paradigm. The brilliance that fills the courts doesn't burn or consume. It invites, it welcomes, it embraces. It radiates the light of homecoming, of love enduring, of a promise kept beyond betrayal. The temple vibrates not with human activity, for no people are present in this vision, but with the sound of creation itself rejoicing. Stone hums with resonance. Metal sings in overtones. The very air dances with the joy of heaven meeting earth once more. In this moment, Ezekiel sees more than the end of a historical exile. He sees the telos of creation, the ultimate destiny of a world reborn by divine presence. The sacred and the secular dissolve into harmony as the king returns, not to conquer, but to dwell. Not to demand, but to abide. It is a homecoming. The glory settles into the sanctuary like a long-awaited guest returning at last. And the temple, crafted with precision and prayer, receives the presence for which it was made, like a bride embracing her bridegroom, like a child clinging to a returning parent. And even amid the fulfillment, mystery remains. For this is the same glory that dwelt in the tabernacle between the cherubim of Solomon's temple that once withdrew in sorrow. Yet now, it arrives transformed, no longer in transit, no longer conditional, but choosing to remain. And now, with the temple inhabited, the vision expands once more. The bronze figure leads Ezekiel to witness the renewal of the land itself. Not just a political redistribution of territory, but a divine redrawing of the boundaries of inheritance. This is no ordinary land grant. It is an act of justice, a sacred geography remade according to equity and purpose. Where chaos once reigned, now order flows like streams. The land stretches out in measured lines from north to south, each tribe receiving an equal portion, neatly arranged in parallel bands from east to west. Gone are the jagged lines that once fostered envy and division. In their place is symmetry, balance, peace. Dan, once distant and idolatrous, now finds itself near the northern border, tasked with stewardship and responsibility. Its position signals not punishment, but redemption. Asher follows, then Naphtali, each receiving their portion, not according to past merit, but according to divine grace. History no longer dictates future inheritance. God's justice does. Manasseh, Ephraim, and Reuben receive their allotments next, each marked by the same exacting standards of measurement that shaped the temple itself. The former divisions between tribes are gone. The half-tribes are now whole. Their land is undivided. Ancient grievances are healed through simple fairness. And then Ezekiel sees something entirely unique. The sacred district, a consecrated space within the land itself, set apart for the priests and the sanctuary at the center of this restored nation. The central territory, shared by the Levites and the prince, belongs to no single tribe. Instead, it serves the spiritual needs of the entire nation. Its placement at the heart of the land underscores a profound truth. Worship forms the core of national life. The sacred district itself is meticulously divided into measured sections. At its center stands the temple, encircled by a designated area for the sons of Zadok, the priests who minister there. This portion ensures they reside near their sacred duties while upholding the holiness their role demands. Adjacent to the priest's land lies the Levites' allocation, a portion that honors their vital role in supporting temple worship, though their responsibilities carry less sacred weight than those of the priests. This geography imparts lessons about spiritual hierarchy and the diverse ways people contribute to divine purposes. The prince receives his portion on both the eastern and western sides of the sacred district. This territory equips him to fulfill his obligations to support worship while safeguarding against the accumulation of excessive power. His land extends to the nation's borders, granting resources but also imposing responsibilities that span the entire land. South of the sacred district, the remaining tribes complete the pattern. Judah, the tribe of kingship, receives the portion closest to the sacred territory, a nod to its royal heritage, yet it remains integrated into a broader framework of equity. No tribe overshadows the others, yet each retains its unique identity. Benjamin, once the smallest tribe, now receives a full portion equal to all others. This tribe, which produced Israel's first king and nearly vanished in civil war, finds itself restored to full status. Divine grace wipes away the scars of past disasters, offering a fresh beginning to those who seemed beyond hope. Simeon, Issachar, Zebulun, and Gad complete the southern sequence. Each name carries memories, some glorious, some painful, all redeemed in this new arrangement. The tribal histories that once fractured the nation now weave into a larger narrative of restoration and unity. The coastlands receive particular attention in this redistribution. Where Philistine cities once threatened Israel's security, Hebrew settlements now stretch to the Mediterranean. The sea, once a source of foreign invasion, becomes Israel's border. Even geography bends to the purposes of divine restoration. The eastern boundaries extend to the Jordan River and beyond, reclaiming territories lost during years of defeat and exile. The river, once a symbol of limitation, now flows through the heart of a restored Israel. Water that once divided now unifies, carrying life across the transformed land. The allocation of land disregards tribal size or political influence. Large tribes and small receive equal portions. Powerful clans and humble families share the same inheritance. This redistribution embodies divine justice, not rewarding past performance, but providing what each needs to flourish in the future. Foreign residents within the land receive extraordinary treatment. Unlike the conquest period, when Canaanites were expelled or destroyed, these foreigners who dwell among God's people are granted inheritance rights alongside native Israelites. The land embraces all who seek true belonging. This inclusion reveals a profound truth about the restored nation's identity. It is defined not solely by bloodline, but by commitment to divine purposes. Those who align with God's people become God's people, receiving full citizenship in the sacred community. The boundaries are designed to prevent the conflicts that plagued earlier eras. No tribe can claim superior access to water sources, trade routes, or defensive positions. The parallel strips ensure each territory includes highlands and lowlands, fertile valleys, and protective hills. Cities of refuge, mentioned in earlier laws but poorly implemented during the monarchy, find their proper place in this new order. These sanctuary cities offer protection to those fleeing violence or seeking justice, creating safety nets that prevent blood feuds from unraveling community harmony. Levitical cities, scattered across all tribal territories, serve as hubs of learning and worship. Their distribution ensures no region lacks access to religious instruction or spiritual guidance. The Levites become a unifying force, linking all tribes through a shared commitment to divine law. Trade routes crisscross the restored land in patterns that foster cooperation rather than competition. Merchant paths connect tribal territories, creating economic interdependence that strengthens political unity. Commerce becomes a tool for building relationships, not exploiting differences. Water rights, long a source of conflict in semi-arid regions, are established with clarity and fairness. Springs, wells, and streams serve the common good, not just those who control them. Even natural resources reflect divine justice in their distribution. This vision of land redistribution offered hope to Ezekiel's original audience, exiles who wondered if they would ever see their homeland again. Yet it also challenged them to envision something greater than what they had lost. This is not merely restoration, but transformation, not just return, but renewal. Agricultural patterns emphasize sustainability over exploitation. Soil depleted under foreign occupation will recover through careful stewardship. Crop rotation, Sabbath years, and Jubilee celebrations ensure the land remains fertile for future generations. Forests and wilderness areas receive protection, preserving wild spaces for animals and future resources. This vision balances human needs with environmental wisdom. The transformed geography creates conditions for the fulfilled life that eluded Israel during the monarchy. With secure boundaries, fair distribution, and divine presence in their midst, the people can finally experience the rest promised to their ancestors, but never fully realized. Yet this redistribution comes with responsibilities as well as privileges. Each tribe must maintain its territory justly, treat foreigners fairly, and support the central sanctuary that serves all. Inheritance carries obligation, the duty to be worthy of divine generosity. As Ezekiel absorbs this vision of geographic justice, he sees the physical foundation for spiritual renewal. These external arrangements create conditions where internal transformation can thrive. Fair resource distribution eliminates many sources of jealousy and conflict that destroyed the earlier kingdom. This new land arrangement upholds justice without sacrificing mercy, maintains order without stifling individuality, and fosters unity without erasing diversity. It is a society organized by divine principles rather than human ambition, a glimpse of what becomes possible when heaven's priorities reshape earthly realities. At the southern edge of the redistributed land, a city emerges, extraordinary in its purpose. This is not merely an urban center or administrative capital, but a city that embodies the vision's promises. Its existence testifies to promises fulfilled, relationships restored, and divine presence dwelling permanently among human hearts. The city measures 18,000 cubits around its perimeter, a perfect square reflecting the ordered justice of divine rule. Yet this geometric precision fosters warmth, not coldness. The careful measurements ensure every resident enjoys equal access to the benefits of urban life. Justice becomes architecture. Fairness shapes the street layout. 12 gates pierce the city walls, 3 on each side, each bearing the name of one of Israel's tribes. This arrangement speaks of inclusion. Every family group finds its entrance into the sacred community. No tribe is excluded from this ultimate gathering place. No name is forgotten in the final accounting. The gates tell stories of redemption. Reuben's gate stands despite his ancestors' moral failures. Simeon and Levi receive honor despite their violent past. Even Dan, the tribe most linked to idolatry, finds its name inscribed in the city's walls. Divine grace rewrites human history with generous narratives. Each gate stretches 1,500 cubits wide, spacious enough for crowds yet intimate enough for individual recognition. The architecture suggests both celebration and personal welcome, community gathering and private homecoming. The city opens its arms to all who seek belonging. Streets within follow patterns that encourage encounter while preserving privacy. Public squares provide spaces for community life, markets, and civic celebration. Residential areas offer quiet refuges where families can thrive away from urban bustle. The city serves both human sociability and the need for solitude. Water flows through the city in channels that bring life to every district. These are not merely practical waterways for drinking and sanitation, but streams that symbolize divine presence flowing through human community. The same river that transforms the temple precincts brings renewal to residential neighborhoods. Gardens and green spaces flourish throughout the urban landscape, preventing the city from becoming a sterile expanse of stone and metal. Trees line the streets, parks offer respite, and cultivated areas produce food within city limits. Urban life remains connected to natural rhythms and cycles. The city's location prioritizes accessibility over defensibility. Unlike Jerusalem, perched on hills that challenged approach, this city sits in open country where roads converge from all directions. It welcomes visitors rather than intimidating them, invites approach rather than discouraging it. Trade and commerce thrive within its borders, but regulations prevent exploitation. Market rules ensure fair weights and honest dealings. Price controls protect the poor during hardship. Economic activity serves community well-being, not individual gain. Craftsmen from all tribes contribute to the city's development. Metalworkers from Dan, weavers from Asher, stonecutters from Naphtali, every tribal tradition finds expression in the city's evolving character. Diversity becomes strength, not division. The city needs no temple, as the great sanctuary lies nearby in the sacred district. Yet sacred space permeates urban life through smaller venues for prayer and study. Neighborhood centers provide places for instruction, discussion, and spiritual formation. The sacred and secular blend seamlessly. Justice flows through the city's legal system with the same reliability as water through its channels. Courts operate transparently, judges serve the law, and proceedings protect the innocent while addressing wrongdoing. Education is a priority, with schools in every district ensuring children from all backgrounds receive practical skills and spiritual wisdom. Learning becomes a civic value, not a privilege for the wealthy. The city's governance prevents the concentration of power that corrupted earlier kingdoms. Leadership rotates among qualified candidates from different tribes, and decisions require consultation and consensus, not autocratic decree. Authority serves the community, not dominates it. Cultural life flourishes, with music, poetry, storytelling, and visual arts finding encouragement. Festivals celebrate both tribal traditions and shared national heritage. The city becomes a center for creative expression that honors divine creativity. Marriage customs strengthen tribal identity while encouraging intertribal relationships. Young people can choose partners from their own tribes to preserve family traditions or from other tribes to build bridges across ancient divisions. Love fosters unity without erasing distinctiveness. Care for the vulnerable is systematic. Widows, orphans, foreigners, and the disabled find support to prevent destitution. The city's prosperity includes everyone, not just the successful. The aged receive honor, their wisdom guiding decisions, their memories preserving traditions, their blessings sanctifying new ventures. Age becomes a resource, not a burden. Experience becomes treasure, not obsolescence. Yet the city's most remarkable feature is not its size, beauty, or justice, but its name, a title that captures what makes this place unique. It does not honor a human founder or commemorate a victory. It reflects no geographic or economic trait. Instead, it speaks the deepest truth about what transforms a place into a true home. The name embodies promise fulfilled, relationship restored, presence permanent. As Ezekiel contemplates this urban vision, he sees the culmination of his prophetic ministry. Here lies the answer to exile's despair, the healing of covenant's brokenness, the restoration of the intimate relationship between creator and creation that was paradise's original gift. The city represents not only Israel's future but humanity's destiny, a place where divine presence and human community achieve perfect harmony. It is both a historical promise to a specific people and a universal hope for all who long for home in its deepest sense. The name, for simple Hebrew words, echoes through the prophet's consciousness like a bell tolling the end of sorrow and the beginning of eternal joy, transforming geography into theology, urban planning into spiritual revelation. The visions fade, leaving Ezekiel alone beside the Khabar River, where his prophetic journey began decades ago. The bronze figure has vanished, the temple measurements linger only in memory, and the city with its sacred name exists only in the realm of promise. Yet something profound has shifted in the old prophet's understanding of his calling. Years stretch behind him, years of strange acts that made him seem mad to his neighbors, years of unwelcome prophecies that earned scorn, years of isolation as the price of speaking divine truth to resistant ears. The young priest, torn from temple service, has become an aged seer whose words will outlive the exile. His message defied every expectation. When his fellow exiles yearned for a quick return to Jerusalem, Ezekiel proclaimed the city would fall completely. When they clung to hopes of political restoration through human schemes, he insisted only divine intervention could heal their wounds. When they sought comfort in familiar patterns, he demanded transformation from within. The early years brought the hardest assignments, acting out Jerusalem's siege while neighbors watched in bewilderment, lying on his side for over a year to symbolize punishment's duration, shaving his head and beard to represent coming devastation. Each act made him appear more eccentric, more detached from reality as others understood it. Yet beneath the bizarre exterior lay theological insight that pierced the heart of Israel's crisis. Ezekiel understood the problem was not merely political or military but spiritual. External restoration required internal renewal. Return from geographical exile demanded return from moral exile. His vision of individual responsibility challenged assumptions about corporate guilt. While acknowledging that communities share the consequences of collective choices, Ezekiel insisted each person bears responsibility for their own moral decisions. Children do not automatically suffer for parents' sins, nor do parents escape judgment through children's righteousness. The doctrine Ezekiel proclaimed arose from the urgent needs of his pastoral role. Exiles, seeking to evade responsibility, leaned on ancestral guilt, claiming their moral failures were inevitable, inherited from their fathers' punishment. Ezekiel dismantled these excuses with piercing clarity. While extending a lifeline of hope, personal repentance could shatter the cycles of inherited destruction. His grasp of divine holiness surpassed even his priestly training. Through his visions, he glimpsed God's absolute otherness, a complete separation from all that is common or defiled. Yet this same holiness, far from remaining aloof, chose to dwell among humanity, transforming people through the nearness of divine presence. The temple vision wove together Ezekiel's deepest theological insights. Architecture became a language of theology, precise measurements unveiled the character of God. Rituals expressed a living relationship with the divine, far beyond mere obligation. The prophet, who began his journey as a priest, returned to priestly concerns, but with a prophetic depth that transformed everything he touched. His influence on later Jewish thought was profound. Talmudic rabbis grappled with his visions, deeming them almost too sacred for open discussion. His vivid descriptions of divine glory provided a rich vocabulary for mystical speculation, fueling centuries of contemplation. His temple measurements sparked architectural dreams that endured long after the Second Temple's completion. Christian interpreters found in Ezekiel's writings a treasury of imagery for understanding Jesus and the Church's mission. The Good Shepherd, the New Heart, the Valley of Dry Bones, these became potent metaphors for spiritual transformation. The New Jerusalem in Revelation mirrors Ezekiel's vision of a city whose name proclaims God's enduring presence. Yet Ezekiel's immediate audience often failed to grasp his message. Fellow exiles dismissed him as a mere entertainer, his dramatic performances a distraction from their woes, devoid of serious meaning. They marveled at his creativity but ignored the substance, treating prophecy as theatrical art rather than divine revelation. The personal toll on Ezekiel was immense. His wife's death became yet another sign act, her passing symbolizing the loss of all that the exiled community held dear. Forbidden to mourn publicly for the woman he loved, his grief was conscripted for prophetic purposes. Even personal tragedy became a tool of ministry. His social isolation deepened as his predictions proved true. When Jerusalem fell, exactly as he foretold, vindication brought no joy. Being right about catastrophe offers little comfort when it engulfs those you love. Prophetic insight often morphs into a burden rather than a privilege. Ezekiel's later visions of restoration offered some solace after years of proclaiming judgment. Yet even these hopeful messages carried a weight, not unadulterated joy. He understood that restoration demanded the same divine power that brought creation into being. Human effort alone could never achieve the transformation he envisioned. His concept of the new covenant left a lasting mark on biblical theology. The promise of hearts turned from stone to flesh, of God's Spirit dwelling within human spirits, of law becoming internal desire rather than external command. These ideas shaped Christian views of salvation and Jewish hopes for a messianic age. The vision of the dry bones stands as perhaps his most iconic prophecy, encapsulating hope that defies rational limits. Dead things could live again, scattered fragments could reunite, breath could return to what seemed utterly lifeless. This vision spoke to every situation that appeared beyond human remedy. Ezekiel's portrayal of divine jealousy, God's passionate commitment to an exclusive relationship with his people, challenged both casual religiosity and abstract theology. This was no distant, philosophical deity, but a personal God whose love demanded wholehearted reciprocation. The recurring Watchman theme defined prophetic responsibility for all generations. Those who see danger approaching bear the duty to warn, regardless of the warning's reception. Silence in the face of looming disaster implicates the silent in the resulting harm. Ezekiel's influence reached beyond religious spheres, permeating literature, art, and popular culture. The imagery of wheels within wheels, living creatures with multiple faces, and valleys filled with bones captured imaginations across cultures and centuries, providing a vocabulary for the mysterious and transcendent. Perhaps Ezekiel's greatest legacy lies in showing that divine calling endures despite human failure. His people rejected his message, his nation fell into exile, his temple was destroyed, his priestly career ended before it fully began. By worldly standards, his ministry was a failure. Yet worldly standards missed the deeper truth. Ezekiel's words outlasted the empire that raised Jerusalem. His visions sustained exiled communities through centuries of displacement. His understanding of God's character shaped theological development long after the historical context of his message faded into memory. The strange, difficult prophet, deemed mad by his peers, emerged as the clearest voice of his generation. His refusal to offer false comfort, his insistence on individual responsibility, his vision of restoration through divine power rather than human effort, all revealed a sharper perception of reality than his critics possessed. The scroll of Ezekiel's prophecies closes with visions of restored glory, redistributed land, and God's presence dwelling permanently among a transformed people. Yet his story does not end with his final words. Like ripples spreading across still water, his message continues to expand, touching lives and shaping understanding in ways his original audience could scarcely imagine. The immediate impact of Ezekiel's ministry was limited and frustrating. Exiles treated him more as an entertainer than a prophet, drawn to his dramatic sign acts while dismissing their divine import. They gathered to watch his symbolic performances, discussed his creativity, but remained unmoved by the truth he conveyed. When Jerusalem's fall vindicated his warnings, their dismissal turned to reluctant respect. The eccentric performer was suddenly seen as prophetically gifted. His earlier predictions gained credibility, opening ears to his later promises of restoration. Vindication brought influence, but at the cost of national catastrophe. The returning exiles carried Ezekiel's visions back to the promised land, but their efforts to implement them fell short of the glorious blueprints. The Second Temple, built after the exile, followed traditional designs rather than Ezekiel's innovative plans. The restored community wrestled with the gap between prophetic vision and practical reality. Yet the failure to achieve literal fulfillment did not diminish the vision's power. Instead, they became benchmarks for every restoration effort, aspirations for each generation, hopes that sustained faith through ongoing disappointments. The very impossibility of complete fulfillment bore witness to their divine origin. Rabbinical interpreters found Ezekiel's writings both captivating and troubling. His temple measurements diverged from traditional accounts. His ritual descriptions challenged established practices. His visions of divine glory strained the limits of language. Some teachers restricted study of these texts to mature scholars capable of handling their mysteries. Mystical traditions in later Judaism drew heavily on Ezekiel's imagery. Merkabah mysticism, centered on the throne chariot visions, sought direct encounters with divine presence through meditation and spiritual discipline. Ezekiel's descriptions offered roadmaps for mystical journeys promising immediate divine connection. Christian interpreters uncovered rich resources in Ezekiel's prophecies. The Good Shepherd became Jesus, gathering scattered sheep. The New Covenant found fulfillment in hearts transformed by grace. The Valley of Dry Bones symbolized resurrection, hope that triumphed over death. Every major Christian doctrine found echoes in Ezekiel's writings. The Book of Revelation, Christianity's final biblical text, repeatedly reflects Ezekiel's influence. The living creatures around the throne, the measuring of the temple, the city bearing God's name, the river flowing from the sanctuary, all draw from his apocalyptic imagination. Medieval artists drew inspiration from Ezekiel's surreal imagery. Illuminated manuscripts depicted the four living creatures with creative interpretations, sometimes straying far from the text. Cathedral sculptures wove the prophet's symbols into stone testimonies of faith, making his visions both visual and verbal. The Protestant Reformation rediscovered Ezekiel's emphasis on individual responsibility and direct divine encounter. Reformers wielded his teachings to challenge systems claiming to mediate between God and believers, arguing that each person must personally respond to God's call. Modern psychology has explored Ezekiel's experiences as a lens for understanding visionary encounters, altered states of consciousness, and the interplay of religious experience and mental health. Some view his visions as products of psychological trauma from exile and cultural displacement. Others defend their divine origin while acknowledging their psychological dimensions. Literary critics recognize Ezekiel's contribution to symbolic expression and imaginative writing. His ability to craft memorable images, blend realistic detail with fantastic elements, and use symbolic actions with layered meanings demonstrates literary sophistication that influences writers across cultures and centuries. Contemporary environmental movements find resonance in Ezekiel's vision of renewed land and flowing rivers. His portrayal of restored creation, water bringing life to deserts, trees bearing fruit beside healing streams, speaks to ecological concerns and hopes for environmental restoration. The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 sparked renewed interest in Ezekiel's prophecies. Some saw the Jewish return to their ancestral homeland after centuries of exile and persecution, culminating in Holocaust survival, as a literal fulfillment of the dry bones vision. Yet others maintain that Ezekiel's ultimate fulfillment lies beyond any earthly political arrangement. The temple he described remains unbuilt, the perfect justice he envisioned unrealized, the complete transformation he promised awaiting future divine intervention. The tension between what has been accomplished and what remains unfulfilled characterizes much contemporary engagement with Ezekiel's prophecies. Believers find in his words both comfort for present struggles and hope for future resolution, offering explanation for current circumstances and anticipation of coming transformation. Popular culture continues to draw on Ezekiel's imagery. Science fiction writers borrow his descriptions of strange creatures and otherworldly encounters. Musicians set his words to modern melodies. Artists create visual interpretations using contemporary media. The ancient prophet speaks to modern imaginations. Academic scholarship approaches Ezekiel with tools of historical criticism, literary analysis, and comparative religion. Scholars debate the composition history of his book, the relationship between his visions and ancient Near Eastern mythology, and the development of his theological concepts. Yet academic study, however valuable, sometimes overlooks the spiritual power that drove his writings. The deepest echoes of Ezekiel's ministry resonate in human hearts that recognize their need for transformation. His message, that change must come from within, that divine power achieves what human effort cannot, that individual response matters despite collective failure, speaks to universal human experience. Perhaps Ezekiel's greatest modern relevance lies in his proof that hope endures even in seemingly hopeless circumstances. The prophet who witnessed his nation's destruction, his temples burning, his people's exile, nevertheless proclaimed ultimate restoration. His faith that divine love overcomes human failure offers courage to every generation facing overwhelming challenges. The strange, difficult prophet, thought mad by his contemporaries, continues to speak to a world as broken as ancient Jerusalem. His visions of wheels within wheels may perplex modern readers, but his core message remains clear. Divine presence can transform any situation. Divine power can resurrect any death. Divine love can heal any wound. The echoes of Ezekiel's message continue to spread, carrying forward a vision that began beside the Kebar River but has yet to reach its final destination. Somewhere in the future, known only to God, Ezekiel's visions await their complete fulfillment, when the city with the sacred name becomes reality and all creation discovers what it means to live where the Lord is truly present.